That's your update for now. You can get more local stories on the Tipp FM app or at tippfm.com.
Tipp Today, in association with Slattery's of Pecan, your main Peugeot dealer for over 50 years in the Premier County. Slattery'sGarage.ie.
Good morning, welcome along to Tipp Today, 1800 938 007. That's our free phone number. It won't cost you if you'd like to make a call, and Stephen is looking after the programme today. Coming up on the show this morning, Councillor Liam Brown joins us to discuss what he describes as a mean-spirited cut to local authority grants for community groups. We'll be talking to him in just a few moments. Breda O'Brien, the PRO of the Tuam Mother and Baby Home Alliance, talks to us about the significance of the 1926 census. We'll also be getting reaction to the withdrawal of tourist and commercial accommodation currently being used to house people from Ukraine. Deputy Michael Murphy will talk to us just after 10 o'clock, and Muriel Cuddy will bring us this week's wellness slot, and Bill the Bard will be with us live in studio. So all of that and much, much more on the way. You can text and WhatsApp 083 311 3311. You can email tiptoday@tippfm.com. As ever, however you might choose to contact us, we're always delighted indeed to hear from you. Now let's have a look at the front pages of some of your newspapers today. The Irish Independent and their lead story from Tipperary's Fionn Sheehan. President Catherine Connolly has used a speech to University of Galway graduates and senior academics to criticise the college over its controversial research ties to Israel on a green hydrogen project. The Irish Daily Mail and their main story: the Health Minister Jennifer Carroll McNeill is under pressure from Fine Gael backbenchers following revelations that 80% of the country's radiotherapy machines must be replaced. Can you believe this? Members of her own party have previously been told by the Department of Health that the 7-year-old machines were new, and wrongly informed that replacement schemes were underway. Also on the Mail today, it's flagged on the front page, but it's a piece by Philip Nolan inside the Mail, and it says, "Whisper it, has the time come to finally ditch the late." And Philip's piece is described as explosive. A little bit of hyperbole there, but I wonder, what do you think about that? Is it time to call a halt to the late show at this point? The Irish Times, and the lead story on the Times: the alleged transfer of more than €1.5 million of taxpayers' money from an Irish autism charity to its UK parent charity could be a breach of the Companies Act and possibly a criminal offence, it's claimed in internal correspondence within the charity. Also on the Times, we're reading that Gardaí last night, they're still searching for a firearm that was picked up by a young boy in Ballymun and discharged. And the child who fired the gun on Tuesday afternoon is believed to be 11, and a boy he was with at the time of the incident is aged at age 6. Can you believe this? Also on the Times today, we're reading that 5 pregnant women who were forced to sleep rough in Dublin last year were among over 100 mothers who gave birth at the National Maternity Hospital while either homeless or at risk of being homeless. To the Irish Examiner, and they're leading with the story that 5 families who lost loved ones to COVID at a Cork nursing home have launched landmark wrongful death actions in the High Court. And also on the Examiner, right across the newspapers, but not always on the front pages, Irish prisons will soon hit nightmare overcrowding levels, with inmates numbers likely to hit 6,000 in the coming weeks. Now, that comes, as you're probably aware, as the Irish Prison Service is bracing itself for a severe threat to security with the potential extradition of cartel boss Daniel Kinahan from Dubai to face charges. And finally, the Farmers Journal is on your shelves today, and Noel Barden's main story on the Journal front page is that ongoing cap reform talks have reignited the debate around what exactly constitutes an active farm and which active farmers should be eligible for cap income support payments in the year ahead. So that's a look at what's making headlines today. If you want to make comment on any of that, once again, it's 083 311 3311. Now, Cashel Councillor Liam Brown is critical of, as he describes it, a mean-spirited reduction in local authority grants to some local groups. And he joins me now. Liam, good morning to you.
Good morning, Fran, and good morning to the listeners.
And good to talk to you today. Liam, what is the background to this?
Yeah, the background of this is, we had a meeting last month and then we had another meeting this month about the allocation of what we call the GMA. Now, the GMA is discretionary money which is given to each municipal area from the main council budget for the municipal district to decide itself where it's going to spend the money. And it's spent on things like, footpath repair and, festivals and things like that. But it also pays for tidy towns groups. So, the allocation for a tidy towns group last year was €63,000. We came into a meeting last month and we found out that they were suggesting in the municipal area that they were going to cut it from €63,000 down to €58,000. So most of the housing estates and the tidy towns groups in the area were all going to get a cut in their allocation. Now, we weren't happy at the March meeting with that, so we refused to pass the allocation. And we asked them to come back in April, which they did last week. And we found out when they came back in April, they had changed the system slightly into a tiered system where it depends on size of estates or size of villages that they would get an allocation. But it actually meant that some of the estates got an even bigger cut when they came back in April, and some estates got whatever money they were going to be allocated taken away altogether. So look, I think we have huge pride in the estates, we have huge pride in our towns, and we give huge kudos to the tidy towns groups and the residents groups that actually look after areas. And then we find out that the small support that they were getting in the first place, and it was small enough in the first place, let's be honest about it, is now going to be cut even further. So the cost of actually doing the work has gone up, and the money that the council are going to give to do the money has gone down. And obviously that's going to mean there's going to be, cuts in the amount of work that's been done and, cuts in the quality of work that's been done. It's as simple as that.
And what was the excuse from the authority about the cuts, Liam?
The excuse from the authority was that they wanted to put the money into other parts of the GMA allowance. They said, we're getting the usual, times are tight. But it's like, I can't really accept that because, we passed the budget last year and we passed an increase in the property tax last year. Yeah. That's what the property tax is supposed to be for.
Well, that's what we were told at the time. That was the excuse for increasing the property tax, was that we would have all of these services properly funded.
That's exactly it, Fran. I mean, the property tax, it was 10% over the baseline going into last year. We increased it to 15% over the baseline, which is the highest amount we can increase it over. And, there's a huge pushback from people when you hear about an increase in property tax. And one of the reasons that people push back when they hear about an increase in tax is they don't see the services that they're supposedly going to get for the increase. And this, to me, is one of the, it's one of the key things I would say, because it's a first impression. It's a first impression spend. It's something you can actually see on the ground. When you walk into an estate, when you walk into a town, when you walk into a village, you notice immediately how well the village is kept or how well the town is kept. So to me, that's exactly what property tax, in my opinion, should be going for. So we voted to pass an increase in the property tax. We got grief off people, rightly so. Money is tight at the moment. And then we find out that the money we voted for the increase is not being spent on what we believe the increase was going to be for. So, I was really annoyed with that when I heard it on Tuesday. And
you said money was being moved around, Liam. Do you know where this money was moved to? What did they view as being more important than these local efforts?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, I'll probably get in trouble now when the administrators listen to me on the radio complaining about this. But for example, we put in funding applications for, say, town centre firsts and RRDF funding, and that has to be matched by the municipal area which is put into. So we've got to pay money to put these reports together. Now, hopefully we will be successful in that and we will have a good outcome and we will get a significant amount of money from the RRDF funding streams. But it still means we're losing stuff that we already have now in the hope of getting money in the future. And there's also the reality that the cost of doing business has gone up. The cost of footpath repair has gone up. For example, our municipal area used to be getting a fund from the IPB, which is Irish Public Bodies Insurance Trust Body, because they wanted to keep the footpaths in good repair, which meant that their insurance claims would go down. Yeah. So we're not getting that funding anymore. So now we've got to put more money from the GMA into footpath repair. But I still think, that we've got to look at how local government funding is allocated in the first place. First of all, we've got to look at the level that we're getting from central government, because I don't think we are getting enough money from central government for local government. And like I said, whether we cut grass in green areas in towns or villages, that's something that we see immediately when we walk into a town and village. And if that's not been looked after, it gives a bad impression of the areas. And it gives a feeling of, well, what are we actually giving our property tax money for?
And is it a bit cynical as well? Because, the authority is well aware that the wonderful people who look after tidy towns and indeed residents' associations, they'll go about their business anyway. Is it cynical?
It is. I was about to get onto that point. It's not only cynical, but it hits on two ends with the cynicism, Brian. If you look at many of our tidy towns groups and our resident associations, they tend to be older volunteers.
Yeah.
They in a lot of cases in Cashel, and the fantastic work that the people in Cashel do, and you see they got a gold star last year. Here we are, Brian, actually getting gold stars for the amount of work that people are doing to beautify our towns. And then we're actually, we're very quick to go to the awards nights. And the most cynical thing of all, Brian, was, we had that meeting on Monday afternoon, and we spent an hour fighting about the cutting allocation to tidy towns groups. And later on that evening in Ballykistine, the awards for the tidy towns last year were being given out. Emily was getting its award for being, a top village in one top village in the country. Cashel was getting an award for getting a gold star. So here we are patting ourselves on the back and taking the pictures and putting them up on our websites to show how great our towns and villages are. And 4 hours earlier we were cutting the allocations to them, which made them great in the first place. So, it's massively cynical as far as I'm concerned that way.
This also plays into people's frustration and wondering, do councillors really have any powers at the end of the day? Here we have something that's very important to local people, but it's imposed on the people and on the councillors, Liam. So, what powers do you have to rebut something like this?
Well, to be quite honest, Brian, and my 10 colleagues won't like me for saying this, but I wanted to take this to a vote and say no, that we weren't happy with the allocation and that we should have more power in how the allocation is allocated. And, and in other municipal areas, I think they do have more power in how it's allocated. Like, we often get presented with budgets, but we don't have an awful lot of input into them. And I think we should have a lot more input in the first place into where the budgets are spent.
So were you outvoted in terms of doing something about this?
Well, it didn't get to a vote, it was basically, it was 10-1, there was no point. I really was really annoyed over this, and I wanted it brought to a vote. But, this is what we were presented with, and this is what we lost out on.
But are you saying that the other councillors in the municipal area of Tipperary, Care Cashel, they're okay with this, aren't they?
Well, they were happy with what the change in the tiered system. You see, here it went, Fant. To this allocation, give each village own or resident association, and then we decided that we would change it around so that villages and towns would give higher weighting in the allocation than resident associations. But the village and towns have an advantage over a resident association where, a village can run a fundraiser to help the tidy towns in the area. A village can go out to the businesses in the village to help the tidy towns groups in those areas. Resident associations don't have that ability. A resident association is not going to have a fundraiser, a general fundraiser in Cashel just to look after the area in itself. So, the resident associations are the ones that I was actually pushing for the most, because I believe the towns and villages have the ability, as you see, Cashel Tidy Towns, it's well supported in town.
Yeah.
It could be better supported. It can always be better supported. But the people of the town will support the Cashel Tidy Towns when they get a chance. But the people of the town won't support Woodlawn Resident Association. They won't support Summercove Resident Association. They won't support the New House Resident Association because they believe that those resident associations should look after their own area. But there's a second thing that people didn't get as well. In many of these areas, Fran, not only are the volunteers that were looking after the areas getting older, but the people in the estates themselves are getting older. So the voluntary contributions that volunteers used to rely upon from getting from houses, a lot of these people are now getting into their pensions. They cannot give a voluntary contribution. Like, this is what the council said to us. Voluntary contributions should be given by people living in the estates. And if they can, they do, and they're very good at it. But as the estate gets older, the ability of the volunteers to look after the estate gets more difficult, and the ability of the volunteers to contribute to the estate gets more difficult. We also have the case now in many new estates where the council provides maybe one fifth of the houses and social houses. Those people believe that they shouldn't be paying a voluntary contribution because they're in council houses. The council should be contributing to the upkeep of the estate. And then many people are renting housing estates. It's very difficult to get a voluntary contribution from somebody who rents an estate because they may be gone in a couple of months' time and they're transient, and they don't feel as attached to an estate as somebody who's been living there long term. So you're finding the actual voluntary contribution is being put on smaller and smaller number of people. Obviously, we have a cost of living crisis. They have to watch their money more and more. The people who are looking after the estate, again, the volunteer cohort is getting smaller and smaller. And in many cases, they've been looking after estates out of their own pockets, Fran. We all know that. The council knows that. So I think it was, like I said, very mean-spirited on the council to take that money away from those people when they're trying to make the estates as best they can.
Before I let you go, can I talk to you about the government winding down now on the policy of offering state-provided accommodation to Ukrainian refugees? I was reading some of your social media posts on this. You're welcoming this, Liam.
Absolutely, Fran, we can go back to May 2022, 3 months into this, Fran, when myself and yourself had this discussion. I've kept the date so that nobody can say that I'm jumping on a bandwagon. I said 5 years ago, Fran, that the policy that was been pursued by the government was wrong. It had to stop. It had to be looked at. We're 5 years down the line. I mean, I listened to Colin Brophy the other day on RT Radio 1, and I feel like pulling my hair out. I mean, the man is talking about some people from Ukraine voluntarily going home. If they're willing to voluntarily go home, Fran, they shouldn't have been here in the first place. If you look at it that way. We still have a situation where we're now going to take 16,000 people out of state-provided accommodation. Where are they going to go, Fran?
Yeah, well, even the housing minister in the Mail today is concerned. They're going to go into the private rental market, Fran. I'm not anti-Ukrainian. I'm not anti-anybody coming into Ireland. I'm anti the fact that the government do not think for 1 minute before they make a decision that's going to have long-term implications and consequences in the country. If you take 16,000 people out of state-provided accommodation and put them into the private rental market, the costs in the private rental market are going to go up. And remember, Fran, we also have the case where the €600 ARP, which is still being paid to Ukrainian refugees, gives Ukrainian refugees who are working and entitled to work, and in many cases in good jobs, a €600 bonus over an Irish worker who may be sitting beside them on the desk. Yeah, but they're winding that down as well.
And again, when they wind that down, what's going to happen, Fran? You're going to end up with more people back into the housing market again, because that's in the hosted market. So those people will come out of the hosted market because the hosts are not getting the ARP.
Isn't it interesting what Simon Harris is saying now, though? He's saying that Ukrainians living rent-free in state accommodation is not fair. It's too expensive, and it's damaging to social cohesion. And he's basically saying that if they had their time back again, they would do things rather differently. Now, if that was expressed a couple of years ago, there'd be war.
You mean, Fran, if they'd listened to people like myself and yourselves 3 years ago? Yeah. Or 5 years ago? This is what really annoys me about Simon Harris. And I'm going to call out, and while you have it there, and you can maybe ask him to come on the radio and have a chat. Garrett Ahern was the person I sat down beside and had that conversation with you. And if you can keep the archives, Fran, I'd be quite happy to go back. I've kept the date. It's the last week in May in 2022 where we had this discussion, and I was pretty much called a racist on your radio. I was pretty much told I didn't understand the nature of the conflict in Ukraine. I said on the radio, anyone who believed that this conflict was not going to last years was literally an idiot. Because it's going to happen in Iran now. We have people who think the Iranian war is going to finish in the next month or two. These things do not start and finish in a couple of months, and the consequences of these happen for years. The Ukrainian community in Ireland, there's no vetting of people coming in. Ukrainians were coming from Poland, they were coming from Italy, they were coming from Holland. As long as you had a Ukrainian passport, you were brought straight in, you were given refugee status, you were given the full suite of benefits, of state benefits, many of which they're still getting even though they're working. There's no means test into any benefit that they're given. The cars on the road without tax or insurance, the cars who don't need NCT. I mean, friend, we were spending millions bringing petrol.
Right, but many people were very proud of that reaction at the time, and that we were being very generous. But I think, as you say, people thought that this was only going to last a few weeks or at worst a couple of months.
Like I said, friend, We should have paused it in 2022, in May 2022, for 90 days and had a discussion on how we were going to do this into the future. We had a discussion on how we were going to house this amount in the future, had a discussion on how much money we were going to be able to afford to pay for this sort of scheme into the future. We now have people already crying about, oh, we can't stop the scheme. The scheme is costing billions every year, Fran. And I mean, like, if somebody wants to come from Ukraine tomorrow morning, they're still entitled to come in tomorrow morning. 5 years after the war started, they're still entitled to come in tomorrow morning and claim refugee status in Ireland. Like, Ukraine is a country the size of Germany and the UK put together. There's been no repatriation scheme by the Ukrainian government. The whole of Western Ukraine is hundreds of miles away from any conflict zone. I mean, we're hearing at the moment that there's random attacks in eastern Ukraine. That was 14 years.
Sorry, your phone line is just breaking up on me a little. Will you just go back to wherever you were standing there? But
you got me there,
yeah. But there's now funding being made available to make it attractive for people to go back home as well to Ukraine.
If it's attractive to go back home to Ukraine, people should be going back home to Ukraine. We shouldn't have to be paying people to go back home. It's either safe or it's not safe. So if we're saying it's safe if we give somebody 10,000 euro to go, why is it not safe to not just tell them, look, it's safe enough to go on anyway? Like, it makes absolutely no sense. It's either safe or it isn't.
All right.
There is nobody going to go back to Ukraine into the conflict area. They're going to go back to Ukraine, into Western Ukraine, which is perfectly safe and which has been perfectly safe for years. And that is exactly where people should have been looked after in the past. When we had troubles in the North, Fran, brought people down to Dundalk, we brought people down to Drogheda, we brought them to Waterford, we brought them to Shannon. We didn't bring them to Greece, we didn't bring them to Italy, which is like what's happened in Ukraine. When there's conflict in Ukraine, brought people whole length of the continent away from Ukraine. I mean, it's absolutely madness what they're doing and what they have done.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time this morning, Liam. Thank you and good morning to you. That's Councillor Liam Brown speaking to us there. Now, I know it's understood that Minister Brown will work with the Justice Minister on timelines concerning the Ukrainians will become eligible for social housing after the accommodation supports are withdrawn. There's also some concerns, by the way, that the IPAS system will come under some kind of pressure from Ukrainian applicants once the Temporary Protection Directive is withdrawn. So this is not going to be without its problems and its issues, and indeed without discussion, I would imagine, over the next while. 1800 938 007.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Coming up from 12 midday.
The Lunchtime Show with Stephen Keogh.
Then from 3 p.m, it's Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Now, earlier on this week, Dr. Conor Reedy joined us in our Nina studio to share insights from the 1926 census and what it reveals about the industrial school at Ferryhouse in Clonmel. The newly released records also include the names of children who were in mother and baby homes at the time. And Breda O'Brien, who's PRO of the Tuam Mother and Baby Home Alliance, has been looking at these findings, and she joins me now. Good morning to you, Breda.
Good morning, Fran.
And good to talk to you today. Tuam began operating in the years prior to the census being taken. What emerged from the data as you would see it?
Well, the data, of course, is for 26 counties, first of all, Fran, as we know, and we see that the institutionalisation of people does not include the mother and baby homes. Now, the census for 1926, Tuam Home had only opened in 1925, and the women and the children were brought from Glenamaddy, which was a children's home in Glenamaddy, where on the 7th of March 25, there were 19 mothers and 100 children. And one of those that came over actually happens to be the person who gives us the greatest testimony, and that is Julia Devaney. She was then known as Julia Carter. She was aged 8.5 years. I believe she was not born in the Glenamaddy institution, but that she accompanied the nuns. She was placed there, and she came across to the Tuam Mother and Baby Home. And another person who is prominent in the census for 1926 for the Tuam home is a lady called Bina Rabbit. Bina was then 28 years of age, and she is the person who witnessed hundreds of deaths according to the death register. Of course, there are no burial records, but Bina Rabbit's name is down. And at the age of 62, Bina witnessed the last death of a little girl called Mary Carthy within the home, and that was in 1960. The home closed in 1961. So the home was run by the bursar, the lady in charge of the money, who was a nun, Sister Barry. There were 18 rooms. There were 157 persons in it at the time. There was a superintendent in charge of laundry, a superintendent in charge of children, and one in charge of the nursery. There were actually 2 nurses also within the home, but they appeared to have been unmarried mothers. And one thing that's quite unusual in this time is that the name of the child born to the mother is down first, and the age of the child, which is always under a year if accompanied by the mother, because after the year the mother left, so the mother's name would go down underneath. And usually occupation is in there as well. But there's a note with many for other homes to say that the occupation wasn't easy to get. The superintendent, the Garda who was writing the occupations afterwards, who was deciding what to write.
Yes, they were the numerators, weren't they? It was the Gardaí who were the numerators, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And they had written at times that that information wasn't available. And so the women were described, and of course they were only 18 to 23. They were either described as domestics or as a farmer's daughter. But those 2 other girls were there as private nurses, it says. But I'm inclined to think that they were mothers themselves who had given birth, because it's not clear that they were actually employed by...
Was there any mention, Breda, of the baby's fathers?
No, there never was. But one of the things that's clear, that when we went to two offices, it must be about 7 years ago, we went and we followed the life of one child within the institution who's now deceased, Tom Ward, who was one of our members. And so Tom's mother arrived at the institution, and as always, they asked the mothers who was the father. That was one of the questions that, had to be answered. Yeah. So written in red underneath was the name of the father as given by the pregnant lady. Now, that wasn't always correct either. I have to state that, because in certain situations we found actually that it wasn't that correct. But the women were obliged, they were asked for that name. And of course, their stay was paid for by the local council. They were not, in Bessborough you found there were many private patients, and they left, the women themselves left after maybe 3 months. And so within the home, the women who had given birth and were remaining there for a year, they were essentially servants looking after those women while looking after their babies and their own child as well. But not so in Tuam. It doesn't state private patients. They were actually paid for by the various councils. And the contract in 1926 would have been, at that time with Galway County Council, the one with Mayo didn't come into play as yet, even though women came from other areas, but they were mainly from the Galway region. And it's interesting, the Magdalene Laundry as well, because I might have spoken to you before about in 2013, a number of Magdalene women were then registered only as deceased, without their ages or their cause of death. And they were registered many years, decades indeed, after their death. So when I was looking through the Magdalene Galway register. Now, their names this time, whereas we say, well, their full names applied for many of the institutions. They're not actually for Galway. But for instance, we have AD in the census, the initials, aged 47. Now, that applies, I believe, to Anne Dean, who died on who was the 8th of the 1st, 28. So she died 2 years after the census. We have another 4 that I was able to pick out. And Mary Jordan died on the 8th of the 9th, 28. And Nora Callahan died on the 3rd of the 7th, 29. And Mary O'Connell died on the 18th of the 12th, 29. And they were quite young. They were in their 30s when they died. And the interesting thing about those, Fran, is that those are consecrated Magdalens, meaning that they weren't in the Bohermore public cemetery, but rather they were in the Magdalen Laundry Cemetery in Foster Street, where the headstone still is. And they had the difference between the consecrated Magdalens and those who were in the Bohermore Cemetery is that they were long stay and they had dedicated their life to the Magdalen Laundry and to the work they were doing. So they did not look to escape, they did not look to get out, and their reward was that they were assured of burial, and they may have presumed that they would be buried right close to the nuns' grotto in the same, in close proximity, but it's not the same location. Indeed, you won't see the grotto from where they are buried.
It's interesting, Breda. And where Tuam is concerned, I mean, some of the data that is now available through the census, does it help with the long-standing concerns around the high child mortality rates, for example? Does it give you any extra information or insight?
Absolutely none whatsoever. No, again, you'd have to cross-check for the deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the children that are there actually died, you know. And looking at the Cappoquin Industrial School, you can see that the children were under 10 years of age. When I looked at Letterfrack, I mean, it's particularly upsetting for Letterfrack. 4 children were taken from one family, 4 boys, 2 Letterfrack, the Turrells from Ballinasloe, and Peter took his own life in 1960 in Hampstead. And he was only 8 when he was placed in Letterfrack in 1924. And it is so sad to see that children who didn't make it out. There was another called John Kelly, and he had fallen off a lorry at the age of 15. He would have been released at the age of 16 in 1930. And, of course, he's in the census, you know, of 1926. So, yeah, there are particularly sad stories to it. But there's so much information, Fran, and I would urge your listeners to look through their own information, to look and find, because, for instance, my grandfather in 1926 was actually in Boston. He left in February of 1926, but he came home that year and he married my grandmother, but he doesn't appear in the census. So I would say to everybody, please have a look and check your own family history.
Absolutely, because it is fascinating. But like the point you made there just earlier on, we were looking at the Ferry House census just a couple of days ago with Dr. Conor Reilly. And again, I was taken out what appeared, because it was a boys' industrial school, Breda, I was taken by what appears to be brothers, 2 and 3 brothers in there at the same time, young boys, you know. And again, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
What is particularly heartbreaking is that, you know, occasionally it says mother dead, father dead. But in some cases, like those boys I've spoken of and the ones you speak of, it's parents alive, you know, and you wonder, how do they cope? Now, there are certain things that, you know, you find quite funny in the census. There was a lady called Dorothy McCardo, and she had been in Kilmainham jail because she was one of the Civil War activists, and she was a close friend of De Valera. But she had written down for occupation, free thinker, and the lady she lived with was Rosamond Jacob. and she had written, not in any religious sect. They were living in Dublin. And Dorothy went on, she was a journalist, she had written books, and she'd fallen out for a time with De Valera. Well, they disagreed on some items, but the royalties of her book, and he had gone to see her prior to her death, the royalties went to Deb in the end. And De Valera himself was a TD at the time, of course. He had 7 children then. And John A. Costello was the Attorney General, and he had famously said during a debate with Noel Brown at the time of Noel Brown's resignation in Dáil Éireann on the mother and child scheme, he had said, I'm an Irishman second and a Catholic first. I might be phrasing it wrongly, but that's exactly
so
what
the shadow of John Charles McQuaid was still alive and well there, obviously.
And he was a teacher. You can look him up in Blackrock College. At the time, McQuaid was a teacher. And, of course, he formed an alliance with De Valera. They became close friends, and he influenced the Constitution. Yeah, it's pretty sobering to look at some of that. And then, again, if, your listeners are interested in what is happening today in the courts, again, a lady who's Margaret, who had been suffered domestic abuse at the hands, Margaret Loftus, at the hand of her Garda husband. She too a Garda. She gave a piece to a presentation to the Oireachtas yesterday, wherein she described the experience of people like her, of women like her, going through courts as being similar, and mentioning in the same breath the mother and baby homes of, the 1940s and 50s, where women had less voice. And, of course, the family law court is private. And I think that's what she was alluding to, was the fact that they could not be recognised and her voice did not carry. And for many years she fought to Margaret Loftus to be heard. And her husband was still a serving Garda at the time, up until very, very recently.
All right, Breda, sadly I must leave it there because there's so much more we could talk about, but thank you for coming on with us today, Breda. Always appreciate it. Thank you and good morning to you. That's Breda O'Brien there, who's Peer of the Tune Mother and Baby Home. What did you make of that conversation? 083 311 3311.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage.
Tipp Today on 1800 938 007.
And you're very welcome back to Tipp Today, 1800 938 007. Lots coming into us on text and WhatsApp today, particularly following my conversation with Liam Brown. And to sum it all up, the majority of people onto us basically agreeing that it is about time that some of that funding for Ukrainian people here was wound down. But one of our listeners, Michael in Killinall, was on and he said the state is sending people back to a war zone, Fran. Many will find their homes are destroyed. Ireland was always a racist state. Ireland did not allow Jewish citizens in during World War II because of the church and state's shame on this state. I'm not sure would I go along with you that Ireland is a racist state, Michael. I think we've been more than generous to people, and I think largely we're a welcoming place to be. But anyway, obviously that is your opinion. 083 311 3311. Now Stephen Leeson is with me in studio. Good morning to you, Stephen.
Morning, Frank.
And good to talk to you today. You're going to have a look at a sporting hero for us. And who have you in mind, Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely, Fran. This time around, I'm looking at Paddy Leahy, who is one of these great legends of Tipperary hurling down through the different eras, and it's a remarkable story. And he was involved in a lot of teams back in the day with Tipperary. One of those great legends.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit more about him.
So, to begin the story, I suppose Paddy Leahy is part of Tipperary hurling folklore, Tipperary legend, and part of the fabric of what defined Tipperary the way it is, and he helped define the game and the legacy as it stands today. So he was born in turbulent times back in March of 1892 and grew up in the heartlands by the banks of the Suir in a hurling stronghold between Holy Cross and Boherlahan, and all that area really has been known as the hurling heartlands of Tipperary, and indeed across Ireland. Yes. And I suppose it's something to do with the River Suir, the good land that's there, and the hurling was always the key thing for people in their lives there for a huge amount. And even today, the Tipperary team is made up with players from Holy Cross, Cashel, Thurles, Upperchurch, Clonolty, Macarkey, all the surrounding parishes as well. So it is a really kind of special area. And the background of it is that he grew up in a family there with his brothers, Johnny of which became the most famous of all, and the townsland that they were from was called Tuberdora. And I spoke to Seamus Leahy, a great historian who's still in Clonmel, and Seamus said, told me for the book that I wrote, The Land of Blue and Gold, that Tuberdora is a very special place, he said. Mick, who would have been Paddy's father, was born just after the famine, but he never spoke about it. He, like many others, craved freedom and to live in peace. And while he didn't talk about wars or famine, they loved talking hurling, and that became, the discourse and the way of life that they had. So the team that were there in Tuberdora around the turn of the century in 1890, before Paddy started playing, kind of defined Tipperary. They wore blue and gold, and they wore these famous caps, and there's a monument to them between Holy Cross and Borlahan. So that was the Ireland that he grew up in, and from there Paddy developed that love of hurling at a very early age, and he went on to play for Tipperary in 1915 and lined out in a Junior All-Ireland, and then in 1916 played with Tipperary in a very famous final that was played in early 1917, and the Tipperary team stopped going up O'Connell Street by the GPO to just mark the occasion and the day. And they went on to Croke Park, played against a Kilkenny team made up mainly of Tullaroan, and the Tipperary side was made up of players from Borlahan, from that area around Tuberdora. And the two teams played that day in Croke Park, and Sid Walton was a very famous player for Kilkenny, the captain of the team, and Tipperary won that day, and he famously quipped to Johnny, who'd be Paddy's brother, we were the better hurlers, and he replied, but we were the better men, and we won out on the day.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. Would there have been a lot of support at that game? I mean, would people have travelled from Tipperary?
Absolutely, a huge amount, and I suppose a lot from Dublin in particular that were there around the time, because the cost of travel would have been phenomenal even back then. But famously, a few years after that, sometime later, Sid was on the run from the English and sought refuge and went to Tipperary and stayed in Tuberdora with the Leahy family in Tuberdora. And also Sean Tracy, Dan Breen, a lot of them would have stayed there at that time when they needed a safe house.
It's amazing the way the GAA is tangled up in the history, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And going way back. So he would have won another All-Ireland in 1925 then. So won that in 1916 medal and 25. And hurling was part of Paddy's life all through. And then by the time the 1940s came around, he was really involved still with Tipperary. And you have to remember that the influence of it all was huge in his life. And, by 1925, when he won his second medal, Ireland was more prosperous than it had been 10, 15 years previously, and the All-Ireland champions got to go to a trip to America over on a ship, the Bremen, over to the States, and they were met with huge crowds there. There's a man called PJ Cahill, a barrister, that arranged the trip and brought them over, and they played in New York, played all through, and that had a huge influence on Paddy in his later life. So he became involved with Tipperary in the 40s and was involved in a remarkable 8 All-Ireland senior medal wins with Tipperary as what wasn't termed the manager, but it was effectively the manager of the team. So he was chairperson of the selection committee, but he always had the final say, and he got very involved in that. And I suppose his record is just incredible in Tipperary terms. The only one I would say that compares is probably Brian Cody in this era. And I interviewed a man for Land of Blue and Gold called Tony Wall, the 1958 captain from Thurles Sarsfields, and he said that Paddy Leahy was the constant guru, is how he described him. And he said he told me a little story that in the league final in 1957 against Kilkenny, Tony was a very young player, and the Kilkenny centre forward was, as he said, a big strong fellow, and he came up the field with the ball, but Tony met him with his shoulder and knocked him to the ground, and the ref berated him, the Kilkenny crowd berated him, but Paddy Leahy caught him by the arm and said, "That's great stuff, that's what I want to see." Drive his breastbone out through his back if you can, them Kilkenny lads. And
it was different, wasn't it? It was so different.
Unbelievable, and that set the tone. Tony Wall won in 58, and Paddy had been involved 49, 50, 51, and then into the 60s when they won 4 All-Irelands in 5 years. And he passed away in 1966, and Tipperary hurling fell into a bit of a lull after that. Some of the players from the 60s were still involved by 71, but after that it just fell away, and it was 1989 before Tipperary won their next All-Ireland. So it was a huge legacy and a remarkable achievement.
And back in those early years when Paddy was playing, was it a very different game? Would it have looked similar to what we see now? Or?
I would say it was probably way more physical. First off, there was no helmets, and the hurleys were longer, and training was probably, more keep that ball moving at all costs as quick as you can. Some people feel that it was even a better game because the ball was going from one end of the field to the other, and there was always a drama and story.
As well.
Yeah, absolutely. and the game you have now is probably more sanitised, and they're wearing helmets. They get a tip, they might go down on the ground.
They're fitter, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and it's evolved, and it's probably more global. That now you're getting a lot of influence from rugby, basketball, Gaelic football, even. Whereas then it was just an Irish game that had developed at its own level, and I suppose he was very heavily influenced too by going to America that time in 1925 and what he saw.
And is that
there.
Documented? What he saw there and that culture shock, is that documented?
There is a diary that was kept of that time, but it's very rare and it hasn't been published in modern times. So there's very little known about it, and it's something that you'd love to see and hear more about, considering it is 100 years ago that it happened. And they were from all parts of Tipperary, travelled over there, and you have to remember they're coming from famine times essentially in Ireland, just after the War of Independence, and you had all that trauma built up, and this group of players got to go to America to see a totally other way of life. And
they must have got an amazing welcome though.
Absolutely unbelievable, apparently, Fran, and they were so well looked after by the Irish in America, and some of them went back and stayed there afterwards, and didn't want to return, I suppose, because they would have seen a way of life in America at that time that was so nice in comparison to what they had, I suppose.
Yeah, what an incredible story indeed. Is it something you'll write about? Will you include that in future publications, do you think?
I'd love to do something on it, Fran, because it's a remarkable time, and it's not that well documented. There's some great historians like Seamus King who has done research on it.
Wonderful.
And there's room there for a huge amount more to be done, I think, on that era and on that time. And on Tipperary hurling, that was the 10th All-Ireland in 1925. We're still looking to get to the 30th this year, hopefully, but it is just the story that builds, I suppose, as you go along.
I love the comment, "We were better men."
Yeah.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Stephen, great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for that. If you want to talk to Stephen is looking after the programme today. 1800 938 007 is the free phone number. News and information is coming up.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie. And used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24 111.
Thanks, Pat, and welcome back to the second hour of Tipp Today. Just a couple of acknowledgements. Seamus was on to us. He didn't give a second name, but Seamus, thank you so much. He sent me the most incredible photograph of the under-15 Southern County Championships from 1964, but they were from Ferryhouse in Clonmel, and it is the most amazing photograph indeed, and all bright, fresh faces there. But of course, we're well aware of what was going on in the background throughout those years. But Seamus, thank you very much. I'm not sure, Seamus, were you part of that team, or were you related to somebody who was part of that? I'm not certain, but thank you. We really appreciate that. Also good to hear from my old friend Pat from the Round Hill Bar, which is on the old Limerick Road, Nina Limerick Road there, lovely place. And he was telling me that Colin Kenny is supplying the music there on Saturday night, and Michael Cahill on Sunday night, who's a great singer and keyboard player. So lots of great music on the way at the Round Hill. And now, glad to be joined by a regular contributor to the show over many years. John Helly is with me. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, friend. And I just said before we start off the serious stuff, I heard you talking there to Stephen about Johnny Leahy.
Yeah.
Tommy Leahy, his youngest brother, was my next door neighbour.
Was he indeed?
In Marley Hill. He owned a Marley Hill house that was once owned by Lena Wright.
Sure, yeah.
And he used to milk Jersey cows only. And because he brought, along with a good few more, he got very involved in the Rockwood Rovers Shea Club. And for years, they were a hurling club. And I got my first hurling and my first pair of football boots from Tommy, because I was born in Carrigain, there in one of the houses in Carrigain. Yeah. And to go across to my grandmother's, I'd have to walk through Leahy's. And then I used to, as a child, he used to bring me to matches and stuff in the yellow Anglia car. And I missed Paddy Leahy, I think. No, it was Johnny or Paddy. I know.
Well, it was Paddy that Stephen was talking about, and he also mentioned his brother Johnny. Yeah.
When I was a child, because Tommy was a real gentleman, and he was on. I was telling Stephen there, he was on the 1931 Triple Crown team, and he used to have his medals below in the house. He won an All-Ireland, but he also won an All-Ireland Junior medal as well, I think.
Yeah.
But he was a guy out with the Rockwood Rovers here for years and years. And he was involved, like his brother with Tipperary and Borland, he was involved in the Rockwood Rovers. And he died in 1978 or 79. I remember him dying below in the house. He died suddenly. And he's buried in the Holy Cross.
Yes.
At the right-hand side of the church, or the left-hand side of the church as you go in the family plot. So there was just a coincidence this morning.
Isn't it just? I love it when we put out a story and it gains sort of legs and it expands and it brings back memories to people, which is fantastic, John.
Yeah, he was youngest of the brothers, as far as I remember, and he was a gentleman.
Very good. And he was Tommy, John, was he? Tommy?
He was Tommy Leahy.
Tommy Leahy. Fantastic indeed. Now, you've been posting on social media on that story that the government will phase out tourist and commercial accommodation for Ukrainian people, up to 16,000 of them, in fact. You make the point, you've no issue with Ukrainian people, and it's important to put that up there, first of all.
Yeah. No, I have no issue at all with Ukrainian people, and a lot of them that I know are very hard-working people, very good people. They're something like the Irish. They're something like, but I do know that I think myself personally that it's the government and the system that's at fault. First, I think the main parties in the government didn't really care, and it was left in the hands of the Green Party ministers, Joe O'Brien and, of course, Roderick O'Gorman. And I think their philosophy, didn't. They just got a free hand, and wherever they could push them, they push them. And
but do you not think, John, that in the initial stages that it was with a good heart? It was trying to accommodate these.
I have no doubt it was a good heart, yes. But the problem was, you see, as time went on, the Irish started to be pushed in the background a small bit, because I'll give you an example. I was diagnosed at that time, and I had an awful job to get my medical care.
You were diagnosed with cancer, of course, just to remind listeners, John. Yes.
That's correct, yeah. And I had an awful job to get a medical care. An awful job. I could not. In the end, I had to get the doctors to write letters for me. I was turned down twice. I had to fill up so many forms, so many means tests. Everything was taken into account. They even wanted to know how much money I spent the previous year on groceries and stuff. It was unbelievable. But then the Ukrainian people were coming in and they were getting all these things. And now I'm in the lucky position. I didn't have a house mortgage, but they were getting rent or this. The people that were putting them up, the hotels were putting them up and getting all this money. Like Banty McEnany is a multi-billionaire from Michael Healy Ray himself.
Yeah.
Let's not be kidding around the bush. They all got large sums of money out of it. And it had to stop sometime. Now, by European law, they're allowed 90 days. We're held 4 years later now. Now, I know some Ukrainians who knew this was coming. And they took action. They took action.
In what way, John? In what way did they take action?
Well, they all got decent jobs. Mm-hmm. They're hard-working people. Yeah. They got good jobs, and they bailed out of the so-called system.
So now they're taxpayers, and they're giving back. Yeah.
Now, yes, and they're giving back. Yes, and I think it was probably. But the Irish people are a race. My ancestors and probably yours, forefathers before us, they all went to England and America, and they had to make do for themselves. And they didn't get any help and all that. And I think that even though we are a very kind society and we're a very open society, we can at times be our worst enemies.
What, by being too generous, you mean, John, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Now, look, go back to Live Aid, and even today you have all these GoFundMes for different sad cases that really should be funded by our own government. Yeah. But I think what's really driving the people, some of the Irish people, a little bit sour was the fact that recently we gave another 40 million to Vladimir Zelensky. Now, I don't know what Vladimir Zelensky is right. If you're following social media, some people say he's the greatest in the world. Some people say he's not. And that he's in the same league as Putin and some more of these guys over there, and there's really no, while they're getting money off of Europe and, they got the recent 90 billion off of Europe.
Yeah, it was finally agreed, yeah.
It was finally thing that there's that they're scoring hand over fist, whereas we're here protesting on the roads trying to get the price of petrol and diesel down by 10 cents, if you follow what I mean. Yeah. So, I think it was the system was all wrong. The government made a balls of the introduction of it, and they're after making a hames of the getting out of it.
And what did you make of Simon Harris coming out and admitting that the initial approach taken by the government to house those fleeing war in Ukraine is not something he would replicate in the future? That's his words now, not mine. Well, he said, I don't think it was a mistake, but I think you learn from every crisis. He was proud of Ireland's response.
And I have noticed recently he'd learned a lot from the crisis. Now, I'd be of that persuasion.
Yeah, sure.
And, I think the Fine Gael boys kept their head down during the protests. And I think that they kind of, they've learned a lot. I think the party learned a lot. They came out on top of Varadkar over what he said, and they didn't show any, every one of them came out and said the same thing. He shouldn't have said it.
Well, that's what he said about the difference between urban Ireland and rural Ireland. Yeah, but he got an awful lot of flack for that, and Fine Gael got a lot of flack for that, because, of course, what people are wondering is, was that what he was thinking, and was that what the Fine Gael hierarchy were thinking all along?
Well, I think there was a certain, Michael Ring said it, the Fine Gael went too far left, even for my liking. Yeah. And I told you on air a number of years ago, I voted for Simon Coveney, and when Varadkar got in, I withdrew my party membership. And there was guys in with him who are no longer in government, who are no longer TDs. Like a man that's the Brian Hayes, that's head of the Banking Federation now, and there was your man that he made Minister for Housing.
From Dublin Central, I can't remember his name,
Yeah, and there was too many of them fellas were put into cabinet, and I think that's where the woke thing came out, because you hear people talk about the right wing in Ireland. There is no right wing in Ireland. Yes, there's a number of individuals, as there are in every country. So there's no right wing in Ireland, and I'll be honest, your friend, I can't see Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil losing the next election.
You can't?
No. even with Micheál Martin, no, I can't, because there is no viable opposition.
Well, I'm sure Sinn Féin would disagree profoundly with you on that.
They're running with the they're running with the hair and jumping with the hound.
But did we not see in the presidential election that there is a distinct possibility of an amalgamation of the left? Surely, John.
No, I think the presidential election is not a true reflection of. One thing about the presidential election, it doesn't affect your social welfare, it doesn't affect your tax, it doesn't affect the price of petrol, it doesn't affect anything like that. It's putting someone in the... And even...
Right, but it could be viewed as a statement on a current government, you know.
No, I wouldn't agree, friend. I wouldn't agree. No, I don't think so. No, and I'm willing to open that argument, but I don't think it was. I tell you, even the county council elections, so they said like last time that Sinn Féin would clear the board and that all these leftists would clear the board. Who returned the two highest seats at local authorities? Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
So you're saying next time round it could be more of the same, John?
Well, there's no, like, in my opinion, my honest opinion, and for me, it's not about personalities. And like, there's a lot of good Sinn Féin councillors out there, but as a party as a whole, for the likes of me, and I'm 63 or something, and for the likes of you, that's probably a year or two younger than me, we still think of the Troubles.
Yeah.
You know, it's 6 in our cross still, being honest about. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have criticised Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. I actually criticised Fianna Fáil a lot more than Fine Gael.
Well, you would, John, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, I would, I suppose. But even at the moment, they had some great leaders, but unfortunately, like I always say, I thank Charlie Haughey, even though I didn't like him. I thank him for the free travel pack, for what he done for people and stuff like that, like, you know. But he also made multi-millionaires as of horse owners and stuff like that.
Right, but he would have been destructive to the body politic in terms of, you know, people's view of politicians and stuff.
There was a time there when Fianna Fáil just ran really over everyone. But then Fine Gael, like, you know, I mean, at the moment, like, you know, I think they have more to offer than the others.
Do you think? Well, the polls. That's not playing out in the polls at the moment, John. But as you said, that's getting away from what we're talking about. Do you think?
You know, and I know that the poll that's taken is the poll on the day.
Yeah.
You can have all the polls.
Well, I mean, you know, the way I look at polls and the way I look at any of these things is I look at it in terms of not just one, but a number of them. And in a number of polls, you have to admit that, you know, Fine Gael is doing particularly poorly under some.
Oh, yeah, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But come the day of an election, when you go in to cast your vote,
it's a different story than you think.
Are you more worried about one thing over another? You're worried about where your next meal has come from, how much you're going to get, how will these people bring down tax here.
Yeah.
I mean, the UFC is a big one now at the moment.
Well,
you know?
There's a lot of people out there very unhappy with taxation at the moment, as you know, and it brought them out onto the streets as well. Just finally, John, what's going to happen then? Do you think that this is going to be dealt with, and are you concerned over the outcome, I suppose, of taking the accommodation away from Ukraine, because the housing minister himself is warning what's going to happen. Yeah,
because there's not enough houses and stuff out there for the locals. Now, mine say the Ukrainians. Now, I don't like this idea of offering them money to go back to Ukraine. I don't like it personally myself. But if they want to go back, they can. But the other side of it is, like I said a couple of times, they're very nice people and they are actually very good workers. And now they're going to have to enter the housing market. And that's where the problem is going to arise. The government never even... I say Colin Brophy went out to the morning to say this, and I say it to deflect away from the fact that there's nothing for the ordinary people, the likes of me and you. Like, you're travelling to work every day from... I know where you live. You're travelling down, and there's probably no break for you in that.
For sure.
And there's certainly no break for me in it, you know. And but like, in fairness, the hauliers and the tractor men and everything, they needed a break. But you can't give break to one people and not give break to another.
Right.
And that's what's happening. I heard the people, like, I'm in the lucky position, but I've heard of people who can't afford to get oil, who can't afford to buy coal. Even up, like, I know we had a lovely week past, but night time was very cold.
It's cold, yeah, absolutely. I had the heat on anyway, for sure.
So I think the government made a hames with it. The system is wrong, and I think the government need to go away, sort out that system. And as for, these Ukrainian people, they want to come back into the market now for a house or for rental accommodation somewhere. Now, I'm sure there'll be conversations had. I know a number of people who have Ukrainians living with them and are getting the grant off the government for them. It's about $600 a month or something.
It is the ARP, the recognition payment.
ARP, yeah. Well, like, and if you're getting ARP at $600 a month and you know that a fella next door is renting his house for $8,000 or $9,000 a month, well, why should you be giving away, an extra 200 or 300?
John, I must leave it there, but always good to talk to you, John. And you look after yourself, and thank you for coming on with me this morning. 1800 938 007. That's my old friend John Halley there. Listener says, what a lovely man on the radio. He's talking humanely about the Ukrainians and also about what's happening to Irish people. I agree, it's the government. Don't blame the Ukrainians. Would like to know where you can get free tax, insurance and NCT so I can tell my Ukrainian friends. Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, that's for sure. And this person goes on to say, I'm sick of listening to nasty people. All right, let me take a break. Back in just a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puckon. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
In a world where the heat is...
Stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.
No, I've done it a lot of times over the last couple of years, but just to point out again, there's some misinformation out there that's accepted as fact. Ukrainian drivers in Ireland, they don't get free tax, insurance and NCT. They're required to have insurance to drive on Irish roads, and they must pay tax unless they qualify for some kind of a temporary exemption. Now, while they may apply for a temporary car tax exemption, they still need to ensure that the vehicles are insured. So there you go, 1800 938 007. Now, the government has defended its decision to exempt modular homes and back gardens from planning permission in the face of a barrage of opposition criticism. The Cabinet approved the exemption last week, but there has been much confusion online about what exactly this means and when it will come into action. Well, Fine Gael TD for South Tipperary, Michael Murphy, joins me now. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Fran. Apologies for the bells in the background, but that's just the nature of being in Leinster House. There's a call to vote for members of the Shannon. It doesn't impact myself, but just apologies for the bell in the background.
No problem. We're well used to it, Michael. There is confusion, Michael, around the whole business of the modular homes. Could you explain the exemptions? Could you put some clarity on this for us?
Yeah, look, I will to the best of my ability, and I may not answer all the questions. I think the important thing to say, first of all, is that the whole exempted development, that planning space around exempted development hasn't been updated in more than 25 years. So this is an option. It's about providing options. It's an option that more than likely won't suit the vast majority of householders, but there are maybe a small cohort that it will. So it allows for a detached dwelling in your back garden up to 45 square metres. You must have a remaining 25 square metres of residual garden space. So as I said, it may not be suitable in all settings. I also want to say as well, Flan, there's another body of work ongoing around rural planning guidelines. It's something that I've been calling for. That's about consistency around ribbon development, sightlines and so on. But just sticking with modular development. So if I could just go through maybe the rules. You have to be, first of all, an owner-occupier. So what I mean by that is somebody may have a second property that may be a landlord. That exemption doesn't apply in that case. So you must be an owner-occupier. It must comply with building standards. You obviously have to just notify the local authority in advance. the height of the modular development can be no more than 4 metres if it's a slated pitched roof. In any other case, no more than 3 metres. As I said, the maximum size is 45 square metres, but must have a minimum size of 32 square metres, must have independent access. It must be able to connect with existing utilities, and that includes water and wastewater utilities. And where there is a kind of a wastewater treatment plant on site, that wastewater treatment plant must have capacity for that additional wastewater. The detached home has to be a minimum of, I think, 0.6 metres or more from any wall or boundary. As I said, the owner must notify the local authority, and the detached dwelling may not be used for the purposes of short-term letting.
Okay, so a lot to digest there where that is concerned. There's obviously a lot of critique of this, and people are wondering about, I mean, the additional strain on the local utilities, for example, Michael. Have you concerns around that?
So just on that, Fran, as you know, in the context of those existing guidelines around exempted development that date from 25 years ago, you or I or any householder can put an attached extension onto your property no more than 40 square metres. So that facility is already there, and that particular facility as it stands can connect to existing water and wastewater facilities. What this regulation, what this exemption is doing, this updated, it's just simply saying that what had to be previously attached to your property can now be detached. But of course, look, there's always a strain in particular parts of the country in terms of existing wastewater infrastructure, water infrastructure. But again, this is just an option for people, Fran, and because of the requirements around, maintaining that existing 25 square metres of garden space, like it's an option that won't suit everybody, but again won't be permitted in the vast majority of cases, because like in many of the urban cities, for example, you don't have that 25 minimum square metre of garden space, but like I think in a rural setting this may in particular be suited, because and in those cases you'll have independent wastewater treatment systems.
What about the quality of the build? Is that taken into account?
And again, I think I said in my introduction there, it must comply with building standards, Fran. Now, I can't go into micro detail on what the building standards are, but it's no different to any extension that you would add to your house in terms of, building standards, appropriate building standards, which are set out in various regulations, but it must be in accordance with, standard building standards,
Yeah, it's interesting. You see, there's a lot to go. I mean, while the exemption might be there, there's still a lot of paperwork here, and you still have to be in contact. You can't just put this up and sort of have somebody start living in it.
Yeah, because what you certainly don't want, and the real concern will be that whilst you have to notify the local authority, and I mentioned all the various regulations in terms of height, distance from boundary, water, wastewater, building standards and so on, that notification to the local authority, but once it's completed, should the local authority receive a complaint and then it's not built in accordance with the regulation, the legislation, then you've got a serious problem. So obviously anybody considering this option, and this option will be legislated for, I believe, just before the summer recess, like it's very important that you follow the guidelines, that you get the proper advice, that you engage with the proper authorities, in particular the local authority and so on. Look, as I said, it's an option, Fran. It's not a compulsory option. It's just an option, an additional option. Like, for example, I had a family in with me last week that have an adult child with a disability, and they want to live independently. They want a bit of privacy, but it's absolutely crucial that the individual can live in close proximity to the wider family, and this is the perfect fit for that particular family. But other families, look, it's just not going to suit. And as I said, you need that required space in the back. Like once the extension is built, that you still have to have that 25 square metres of residual garden space. So as I said, in many settings, this will not be possible. For example, in my own setting, I don't have the required space. This is not an option for me. In fact, it's not an option, I would say, for the vast majority, if not all, living in my own estate. Just to give that as an example, because you cannot maintain that 25 square metres of residual garden space. It's really suitable for people that have large rear gardens.
What if I have built something at the back of my house, and say if it conforms to everything you've said, but I didn't get planning permission in the first place? Can I apply for to have this now seen as being a modular home?
That's a good question, Fran. My understanding is that it will not apply retrospectively. But then again, if it's, just, without complicating matters, if the particular development is there more than 7 years, it's exempted from enforcement proceedings in any event. But this will not be retrospective legislation, is my understanding.
Is there any chance that this will lead on to what some people would see as sanity, which is that if there's a farmer and he has plenty of land and he's prepared to give a couple of acres to a son or daughter to build a home, that they should be allowed to do so without any fuss? Is this pointing towards that being a reality now?
I don't really understand your question, Fran.
Well, you know the way that not everybody, I mean, even if you're born on a farm, not everybody gets planning permission to build a house on their parents' farm, for example.
No, that has substantially changed in the context of the most recent county development plan. We, previously, and you're absolutely right, Fran, it was very restrictive, and it was only the son or daughter of a farmer, and a farmer defined if somebody with more than 20 hectares, 40 acres, so somebody that had a farm, say, of less than that, 30 acres, that son or daughter could not build a house. But that has now changed, as well as that restrictive clause. There's an additional clause now that you can build, providing that you're from the area within 10 kilometres of the site for a period of more than 10 years. So that restrictive policy, certainly in the case of Tipperary, is gone, Fran, and I was very involved in the framing of what is now our current county development plan. It's far less restrictive, and the vast majority of people can build on their family farm. That restriction of a minimum of 40 acres is gone, having to be a son or a daughter. If you're simply that individual, that farmer can sell a site to anybody from within a 10 kilometre zone. It's actually 5 kilometres where it's an area of special conservation. But that restriction that you refer to, Fran, is long gone now, thankfully, and is not in place in our current county development plan.
On the show, well, all the time, but over the last few weeks in particular, again, we've been talking about sulkies. You're calling for a national response to road safety laws around horse-drawn vehicles in general, Michael. Will you tell me more about that?
Yes, look, obviously I want to work with Liam and Michael locally, indeed all the local public representatives, and of course we were all shocked by that recent incident in Clonmel, but unfortunately that wasn't an isolated incident. And I'm coming from this in my role as chair of the Oireachtas Committee on Transport. It's something that we've been looking at since the beginning of the year, doing a policy document at the moment. It's very complex. There's much legislation. Obviously, in terms of welfare, there's the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013. When it comes to local authorities and bylaws, there's a Control of Horses Act 1996. And then in terms of road traffic legislation, I think there's 6 separate pieces of legislation. So what I'm trying to say there is that the issue, the challenge, sits across multiple departments and of course spans road safety, animal welfare and enforcement. So I'm of the view, my colleagues on the committee are of the view, that it requires a whole of government approach. I've written to the Minister for Transport, Agriculture and Justice the urgent establishment of an interdepartmental working group that would be formed as soon as possible. We need to look at a comprehensive review of the current legal and regulatory framework. We need to look at road safety. We need to strengthen animal welfare. We need to, certainly at the outset, assess enforcement powers. I'm fully of the view that we need to explore the potential for a licensing or maybe registration system. For example, there is nothing in legislation that sets a minimum age for a horse-drawn vehicle, and I don't think that's good enough. There's nothing in legislation around preventing a horse-drawn vehicle on a motorway, strategic regional road, town centre. Yes, there's legislation around racing, but unfortunately I believe no horse-drawn vehicle should be on a motorway, no horse-drawn vehicle should be on a regional road, and I'm fully in favour of doing what Kilkenny did, and that's the establishment of exclusion zones in town centres and urban settings as well. But I just feel that in terms of what we want to do at the local level, we need a bit of help at the national level, and that's why I'm calling for this establishment of an interdepartmental group. I've already met with officials in transport and agriculture, and they've already expressed support for the establishment, because look, they're themselves getting calls, emails on a daily basis from various interested parties, groups. It's a huge issue, and it just needs to be dealt with. And in order for it, I believe, to be dealt with properly at the local level, you just need to be supported at the national level in terms of strengthening of legislation.
Yeah, because you made reference yourself to that incident in Clonmel, shocking, and as you described it, deeply distressing indeed. The tragic death of the horse there, and the possibility of accidents around this with other people in cars and pedestrians and the like as well. Whatever you might bring in, Michael, I mean, are you sure that we'll be able to police this though in some way?
Yeah, and that's why I specifically referred to, it's not just a road safety issue, it's not just a welfare issue, but, enforcement is a real challenge. And, I have to be honest, there are existing laws there in terms of welfare, road traffic, Control of Horses Act. There is existing legislation. Yeah. I'm not so sure the extent of which that's been done. For example, I put a parliamentary question into agriculture, and I was able to establish that the Department of Agriculture carried out 300 inspections last year in terms of checking various facilities for, where horses were in existence, for passports and microchips. But I think in all those 300 inspections, they were kind of established equine facilities, breeders, trainers and so on, looking at herds and so on. I'm not so sure the extent, if any, inspections that are being carried out outside of horse breeders, horse trainers and so on. And I think you know exactly what I'm referring to there, Fran. That's why I think we just need to strengthen enforcement. But look, we all need to sit around a table, because, what happened in Clonmel, we were all very, very distressing. It wasn't just, there was loss of life. Let's be honest, a horse lost its life. There was 2 cars damaged. Raises the whole issue of insurance. I believe for horse-drawn vehicles, sulkies, that insurance should be absolutely compulsory. I believe that there should be a minimum age of 17, 18 years of age. But you're absolutely right, Fran. It's all very fine having legislation. If it's not being enforced, well, then we've got a big issue, And on the issue of enforcement, actually, I'm meeting the superintendent in Clonmel next Tuesday to discuss this very issue and a number of other issues as well. I feel that strongly about it, but I want to work closely. And I mentioned Councillor Liam Brown, Councillor Michael Brennan, and others as well. And because it just can't continue.
Can I bring you into the conversation we've been having this morning with a couple of different people about the government to phase out tourism and commercial accommodation, housing up to 16,000 people from the Ukraine? Your own party leader, Simon Harris, admitting at this stage, Michael, that the initial approach taken by the government to house those fleeing war in Ukraine is not something he would replicate in the future. Are you happy enough that this is being dismantled at this point?
I am, Fran. So this is a recommendation of a cabinet subcommittee that was established earlier on this year, and obviously a final decision will come before cabinet, I believe, in the coming weeks. Temporary protection was originally designed as emergency support. As an emergency support, I think we're 3 years now into the war. So what we need now, and bearing in mind that the temporary directive is due to finish in March of next year, is a system that works long term. so that your listeners are fully informed, I tabled a number of questions. I'm trying to establish exactly what we've spent on, commercial accommodation, the ARP system over the last.
Do you have that figure, Michael?
I do, Fran. In terms of commercial accommodation, since 2022, Fran, we've spent 2.9 billion euros to date. That's just on commercial accommodation. It reached a height in 2023 of 1.1 billion. In 2024, 861 million. And in 2025, 450. It is coming down, but the cumulative spend on commercial accommodation for Ukrainians has been 2.9 billion. We've spent a further 467 million on the ARP programme, 112 million through local authorities, and the City West Transit Hub we spent 44 million. So a total of 3.5 billion has been spent, and that's right up to date. That information was made available to me in recent weeks, Fran.
It's eye-watering money, and there's so much profiteering went on with this money as well, Michael. I mean, would you go along with that?
Absolutely. I'm very uncomfortable, Fran. Look, I'm in national government now since maybe 18 months. I'm trying to make my voice heard. I think in an earlier conversation you've had with previous guests, backbenchers are trying to make their voice heard on so many different fronts. Look, the support for Ukrainians is not ending, but it needs to change, and I think we need to move from that emergency response now to a sustainable long-term system. I don't think Ireland can no longer, this is taxpayers' money. I'm always of the view that taxpayers' money needs to be spent in a fair and sustainable way. This is a transition now. It's important that it is phased. We don't need a cliff edge, and that's why I welcome the decision now in advance of the March 2027. Now, I do accept that the directive may be extended, but it may not be extended because, and again, I think you alluded to it earlier, it is a concern of mine. There is that housing pressure argument as well, but I would argue that
James Brown is talking about that this morning in the Irish Daily Mail, and he has serious concerns about the impact on housing from this.
Yeah, and look, that pressure already exists, Fran, and one can argue that this policy may add to it, but I don't think we can sustain that level of spending, 3.5 billion since 2022. And when it comes to housing, whether it's homelessness, the rental market, affordability, which I feel very strongly about as well. We just have to build more houses. And look, there is momentum there. Over 36,000 houses last year, which was a 20% increase on the previous year. And the stats for this year so far, we've seen commencements in the first 3 months up 200% on last year. So we just
we need so much more, as you know. Can you understand, though, how ordinary people are so frustrated? I mean, the government made a huge deal of, the more recent a bailout of, what was it, almost $750 million. But, I mean, here we spent 3.5 billion, on Ukrainian people. It's such a huge amount of money, and people are out there then struggling, and many of them out there, and they can't afford heating.
Yeah, look, and this is taxpayers' money, Fran. So look, I absolutely understand that sentiment, and whilst I mightn't always be vocal, as vocal as people may like, I can only assure people that I am very connected to the ground, and I always make my voice heard within the parliamentary party, and I've been speaking about this particular expenditure for the last number of months, and I do welcome now that we have a recommendation from the Cabinet subcommittee. And, as I said, look, Ireland still stands with Ukraine, but we're now doing it in a way that works not just for today, but for the years ahead. I think it's important to put into the conversation, and I heard your conversation with John Most. I think that was the last interview.
John Halley.
And I think it's really important to put into the debate that presidents, like the Ukrainian economy, is really, really struggling. They're struggling for workers. 1.2 million across the European Union now have already returned to Ukraine, but President Zelensky himself has issued a national appeal for Ukrainians to return. They're starved of workers at the moment. So look, I think that needs to be just included in the debate as well. But no, that expenditure is no longer sustainable, and I do support the winding down down that transition over the next 12 months, both on the commercial accommodation side, Fran, but also the winding down of the ARP subsidy as well.
Right, but we got it wrong in the first place, would you go? Because that's virtually what Simon Harris is saying.
Well, look, it was an unprecedented situation. I definitely think what I would say is maybe strong lessons learned. I think we may have
expensive
done the right thing
lessons,
at the time.
Michael, a very expensive
but a very expensive lesson. And I can only assure your listeners that I'm trying to be as much as I can, be a voice within government, to affect that change. And I think this is the right decision. But look, we still stand with Ukraine, but we cannot sustain that expenditure when we have so many other pressing issues at the national level and so many cries for funding and so on. We cannot sustain that level of spending. Like in essence, in 4 years, 3.5 billion euros. I've no doubt we spend money in the years ahead, but nothing to that extent.
All right, Michael, thanks for your time this morning. Thank you. Good morning to you. Deputy Michael Murphy speaking to us there from Leinster House. We'll take a break, back in just a moment.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1-800-938-007. Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's
Join the conversation in Tipperary. Contact us through Facebook, Twitter, or email tiptoday@tippfm.com.
Now, Stephen is back with me. 3.5 billion. That's incredible. It's eye-watering, isn't it?
Oh, unbelievable figures, Fran. It's hard to even imagine how much has gone into it in the last while, and a lot of callers, a lot of texts in about it as well.
What are you getting, Stephen?
People saying that the amount of money spent in recent times by the government is insane. Another caller said that planning laws are old-fashioned. They need to be upgraded to keep people in rural Ireland. Road safety also a huge one as well. The laws have fallen apart since COVID restrictions. People don't see the danger on roads. They park erratically. Sulkies are the same as many car drivers, sulky drivers that is, and there needs to be a safety initiative from the government. Another said, roads are dangerous. I stopped walking on local roads in Cashel because of safety issues, and I get a bus or drive to the local sports grounds to walk because there is not enough safe places to walk. Another, not enough houses being built at the moment and money being spent on the wrong things. Another, there needs to be coordination in schools and the HSE regarding dental appointments, and my daughter's waiting 4 years to see a dentist through school, which isn't good enough. That was in relation to Michael Murphy about money not being spent through other issues because money is being spent on different subjects and different topics. Another caller said what a lovely man John Halley was for talking about Ukrainians and what happened to Irish people, and that she's sick of listening to nasty people. Another said the media has a role to play in the Ukrainian situation. At the start, the narrative was that Ukraine was under attack from Russia. Now that has changed, and relating to the president, that the president can't be viewed as the left succession. As she said, the candidate number was low in the election and spoiled votes were high. Another says a lot of Ukraine is not under attack and is continuing with day-to-day life as normal. So, big variety in the text in. And Paddy Leahy, then a caller, said that he was a gentleman and he remembers him wearing a cap and talking as he was revered that time, even in Tipperary back in the early 60s, and hurlers like Babs and Lynn Gaynor would offer a lot for his thoughts. And another said the 60s hurling was all scalping, as they said, and it looked so different when they didn't wear hurling helmets. And another saying that the hurling was wild and crazy, but was better than today. So there you
go. Yeah, it was interesting to hear John Halley's recollection of Tommy Leahy as well, who was a younger brother, I think.
Yeah, and even the link there, Fran, with Lena Rice, who lived there as well, who won Wimbledon in the 1890s. And then you have, one of the famous Leahys of Tuberdora in the same place out in New Inn. Like, there's a lot of history there built up in Tipperary, and a lot of it gets lost over time.
I was saying to John, isn't it lovely you throw out one story and it becomes several stories? Isn't that? I just love that, when that happens. Great to see you, Stephen. Thanks very much indeed. If you want to talk to Stephen, it's a free phone number, 1800 938 007. News and information is coming up.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24111.
Thanks, Pat. Welcome back to the final hour of Tipp Today. A listener says, Fran, can I ask you, is there an election coming? Because I've never seen such a U-turn on what they're now doing, pulling the rug out from about 16,000 people when it comes to housing. Government policies were wrong from day one. It took them years to realise that everything has basically backfired on them. Now, you see, there are by-elections coming up, and cynical people, of which I'm not one, of course, might say that it probably explains some of the more recent decisions, but there you go. It's time to talk to Muriel Cuddy about stress today. How are you, Muriel?
I'm actually great. I'm not stressed at all today, even with the weather, which is unusual,
well,
so it's
see,
great.
I'm stressed all of the time. And, I kid around about that quite a bit, but there would be an element of truth to it.
It's a choice as well. So I could be stressed today.
Okay.
I could be stressed. Like, I've all gone different directions, and the rain, and there's so many things, and I'm on until 9 o'clock tonight.
Right, so the stuff there that you could stress over.
Oh, there's so many things I could be anxious over
today. But you choose not to.
Well, I choose to. It's funny, because when I was in the gym this morning, I was thinking to myself, as I was looking down across the gym at all the people that were there, all the people that were there were all in their own heads. Nobody was looking at anybody else. There was a couple of men sitting on the machines, and they weren't even lifting the weights. I could see them staring into space. And I was thinking to myself, no matter what is in anybody's head here in the gym today, they're going to feel a little bit better going back out the door because they chose to come. It isn't even a choice for me anymore to go to the gym. It is literally like putting on my shoes. It's part of what I do every day, because that's part of alleviating the stress and being able to manage and cope. The same as the eating and all that kind of thing. So, but it is a choice. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, about like how stress manifests in the body. How it can wear the body. I think this is so important, Fran, because so many people come into me every day and they come in with different things. Like, it could be like type 2 diabetes, or the cardiovascular side, or, can't lose weight, or they'll come in with so many different things, right? But when I go under the root cause of why is this happening, where is it coming from? Like, so much of it, we bring all the way back down to, are you stressed? Yes, I am. Where is it coming from? Well, I don't know. I know one or two of the triggers, but the one or two triggers manifest into everything, because then somebody starts overthinking. So when you start overthinking, or when you have chronic stress in your body, it means your body is staying in a prolonged alert mode rather than turn into baseline. Right? So, and that can happen all day long, every day.
Is this fight or flight?
This literally, like, it's like cortisol is there all the time, and it wears down multiple systems over time. It's like stress, the response, it never turns on and off with chronic stress. When chronic stress is there, it stays elevated, your cortisol. It stays dysregulated. Your nervous system remains overactive all the time. Your body never shifts into that rest and repair mode. And that's the piece, even say with the digestive issues that people have. Yes. I literally have to go underground to say, right, what are the long-term effects? How does it affect the body? And I have everyone, like this week, like I've had men in their late 30s. You know what I mean? I like women, like mid to whatever, late 40s, even younger. Like, I even had a teenager that came into me in the last 10 days, whatever, and brought it all the way back down. And there was other issues there, but stress was one of the main issues in relation to the anxiety and the IBS, not being able to control the IBS, which is your irritable bowel. Yeah. So, like, can I talk about how many things chronic stress affects? How many systems in the body it affects, right? So the first, your brain and your mental health. So persistent anxiety, irritability or low mood, difficulty concentrating or memory issues, the higher risk of burnout or depression. Number 2, heart and circulation. Your increased blood pressure, greater strain in the heart, higher long-term risk of cardiovascular disease. How many doctor surgeries are full with this? Hypertension, etc. Right? Crazy. Your immune system. Chronic stress deregulates your immune function and causes inflammation. Right? So if you have a suppressed immune system, more frequent illness, you're tired. You know, the lingering fatigue, it's just there all the time. No matter 12 hours sleep, you're still tired. Right? Slower healing and recovery. That's the general aches and pains. Feeling run down all the time. Every single cough cough and cold that comes, you get it. Your digestive system, it disrupts the gut-brain connection. I talk about that all the time. The gut is our first brain. So if you've got that, then you've got flare-ups of conditions like your IBS. People think that's coming from food. A lot of the time we can have the most perfect diet and we're still getting the flare-ups. Bloating, cramping, irregular bowel habits like your diarrhea and constipation, nausea, your butterfly feelings, the gut feeling in your tummy, just that anxiety again. Wired but tired. Feeling exhausted but unable to relax, trouble or falling asleep or staying asleep, racing thoughts at night, the cortisol rhythms get out of sync. Like our melatonin is supposed to come in the evening time, our cortisol comes in early morning to wake us up, etc. When that's completely out of sync, you're going to be awake by 2 o'clock and your mind is going to be racing, right? Anxiety and the hyperarousal pattern, racing heart, shallow breathing, feeling on edge or easily overwhelmed, difficulty switching off. That's your nervous system. It's stuck in overdrive, right? The shutdown, burnout pattern, your system goes in the opposite direction, conserving energy after overload. So this is the low energy, the lack of motivation. Like you want to do things like the windows need to be washed, the lawn needs to be cut. You're just not able. The lack of motivation is there. The brain fog, the emotional numbness, that you should be upset over things or you should be concerned about things, but you're just not able, withdrawn from things. I've had that I don't know how many times in the last 2 weeks. Like, I'm not able, I'm withdrawn from things, everything's going on around me. One girl said to me during the week, like, she said, my husband is talking to me, he's telling me things, he's looking at me saying, is that going in? And she said, I haven't heard a single word he said until he would say going in, kind of at the very end. And that was complete stress with her, nothing to do with any other, digestive issues or whatever.
And had she reason to be stressed, if you know what I mean?
She did. She's self-employed, so she owns her own business.
Oh, right. Okay.
Now, you can have the reason, right? Now, there's two others, and I'm going to go back to the reason, but the hormones in your metabolism. So the sleep disruption, that's a hormonal one. The changes in your appetite and the cravings. So you can't work out why you can't eat well. But if you're stressed all the time, like insulin, that's another hormone. So you know what I mean? So you're going to be driven towards your sugar things, the weight gain, especially around the middle. And like, again, we have the perimenopause and the menopause piece, and people are like, I'm on diets, I'm doing everything right. Why do I still have this piece around the middle? Well, again, hormones, right? Increased risk over time of conditions like type 2 diabetes. Or if you already have it, the ability to manage it is really hard. Muscle aches and pains. So chronic muscle tension, neck, shoulders, back, jaw, headaches or migraines, back stiffness. This is because the body stays physically braced, like it's prepping for impact. When you're stressed, that's the way it is. So it's a complete wear and tear on the body. That's what it is. And going back to the girl that you said, right, she had, yes, a lot of reasons to be stressed. But were they controllable? Yes, they were. So could you talk about them, and could you actually put parameters in place around them? Yes, you could. Chronic stress, when you address it, is reversible.
Right. Can I ask you a personal question? Were you the type of person who would have been stressed over the years, and have you learned to deal with it, or are you one of these lucky people that can sort of...
No, I have both, literally, as in it's genetic. We used to say if there was a rabbit in the garden, the daddy'd be worried about the rabbit. What was he doing? So it's innate, right? Yeah. And the other piece was, yes, I worry over so many different things, become anxious over so many different things. But it's funny, my husband said something to me last night. I can't remember what it was about. And I said, I'm not worrying about that. I'm not stressing about that. That's not even... And he looked at me and he started laughing and he said, oh, is this the new Muriel? And I said, I'm not getting concerned about things that I don't have to be concerned about now. So what I do is I live in the now, literally. So today, this minute, whatever. If I can't control it now, I have trained myself to put it to one side or literally forget about it, if at all possible. So say work, I'm self-employed. So have all the concerns and everything to go with it, money in, money out, all the different pieces that go with it. But you can only control so much. Do you know what I mean? So I can't control tomorrow. I can't control who's coming in or who isn't. There's so many things I can't control. And when you learn to leave go of them, like this girl, her premises had been broken into, about 20,000 euros worth of stuff had been stolen, so many different things. She was trying to make it up by seeing so many people. So she had 8 or 9 people a day, 2 young kids at home. She had all of this. But like, when we talked about it, there were things she could put in place that she could pull back. She didn't need to do as much. She didn't need to pay it back as quickly. There was things even in her personal life she would have been able to pull out that she didn't have to have the same expense. Kids didn't need to do as much as they were doing. She could pull them out 2 or 3 activities that she didn't have to finish and tear to this and this. So there's so many things that we can do to actually alleviate. Like, I've chosen to work now my 40 hours in 4 days. So like Thursday now is whatever, 9 to 9, right? Yes. But that means I'm off on Friday. So because I'm off now tomorrow, I have an extra day in my week to do my bits. So by Saturday and Sunday, I'm actually relaxed. So I'm coming back into the week renewed again. So I actually find I'm given more now in the clinic than what I would have given, most especially 2 years ago, because I was in the middle of high stress. So I think when you're there and you do burn out somewhere along the way, it's a piece of like, you have to look at your life and say, what age am I? How many years have I left? And if this is going to leave... Yeah,
but
sorry.
Isn't it, not at all, but isn't it interesting about the self-employed woman, who is obviously a very bright woman, but it was you looking in on her life that could pinpoint the areas that she could sort.
Oh, totally, because like stress isn't an event, it becomes a loop.
Yeah.
Right? So like it's a trigger, body reaction, repeated over time becomes a pattern.
Yes.
And then that pattern is very easy because our body likes pattern, it recognises them. So you're going to go straight back into your fallback, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm anxious over this, or, you know, like I have the radio show this morning, I'm overthinking who's going to be on, all of this kind of thing. Whereas if you choose not to do that, you can actually break the loop, you can interrupt it. Like, it's not about forcing yourself to relax. You have to work with the body and the mind. You have to work with the two together so that you're breaking the loop, if that makes sense. Okay, so thinking your way out rarely works. There has to be things that you actually do. So say if it's your brain, like say things like slow breathing. You know, so if you're really stressed, that inhaling for 4, the count of 4, holding it for 4 and releasing for 4, cold water on your wrists, if you're that really cools down the body or the stress response. Grounding, and I know that's talked about a lot, but it does work. That's bare feet. So sometimes you can take your shoes and socks off and just put your feet on a cold floor. I know grounding is outside, but even just to do that alone reduces the response. Like gentle movement, and that's literally like walking, stretching, shaking out the tension. It directly reduces the fight or flight response. Like, so instead of sitting and overthinking, take action. That's the biggest thing. So that, like, if you're holding tension in your jaw or your neck, you know, even the shoulder rolls and all that kind of thing, all of those things work. IBS, eat more slowly, take more deep breaths, gentle walking after, definitely gentle walking after every meal. If it's only for 5 or 6 minutes works. Wired and tired, and we can all do this. I don't think I'm on social media, not even half an hour a day. I would even think even half an hour a day is more than...
I'd be ashamed to tell you how much I'm on it.
I would have been. And it's funny because I was doing an exam last night, right? And this will just tell you how your mind can go straight back, or your body can go straight back into patterns. So I was sitting on the computer doing what I had to do, and I had to concentrate. I had to get my answers or whatever, right? But the phone was left beside me on Do Not Disturb, right? The phone flashed. My first instinct was to go and pick up my phone. If I'd picked up the phone and looked at whatever was on it, straight away my mind was gone from what I was doing. But it was my instinct, and it wasn't just once. My mind flashed back to my phone, I would think 10 times while I was doing that exam. Now, the phone should have been out of sight. Now, anyone that's listening and said, you stupid whatever, to even have it left there and not turned upside down.
But it just goes to show you the power of it, Muriel, you know.
The stimulation, an overstimulation. You go on Instagram there, and next thing is you're gone down into a rabbit hole of whatever, and there's 45 minutes or an hour gone, and that late at night, and loads of people leave their phone until they get into bed at night if they're busy all day. The last thing they'll do is check who's online, check who's doing what, whatever. So much is filling your mind at that hour of the night. Then, she's wearing that, she bought that, he's doing that, oh my God, I didn't do that with the kids today. So many different things fill it. Why do you need that?
And then you're going to try and sleep.
Oh, your eyes close then, and what's actually happening, you know? And even, when you're very stressed, we burn through things like magnesium. You know, now magnesium definitely helps you sleep at night, so to take that and maybe, 90 minutes before bed. But all of these things work. Morning daylight, open your curtains the minute you get out of bed in the morning and leave that daylight in. That's one of the things that resets and rewires you, you know. I suppose the others then, the caffeine, that's amplifies, and everybody loves their coffee or whatever. But I actually find... coffee is another, it's another pattern. It's another habit. There's so many habits that we have. A lot of people don't even like coffee. They actually feel they just need it.
It's just habit.
It's a habit. It's like smoking. It's literally hand-to-mouth thing. And when I actually make people drink their water, so I'll say to them, you can have your 5 coffees a day, but you have to drink your water before you have your coffee.
Right. And what does coffee do?
So coffee is caffeine. Okay. So it's stimulation, adrenaline, all of that. And so many people are having their coffee before they have their breakfast. So you're putting this straight into your body.
So if you're prone to being stressed, and here you have a coffee, which is going to accelerate it, obviously.
Totally. And you imagine putting that in first thing in the morning. You're literally getting that high.
Am I blushing?
No. And I'm not looking. The glasses on. But you can imagine having a latte or something.
Yeah.
So you're having the milk, You know, if you put like vanilla or maple syrup or whatever syrups into it, you're having the sugar. So like you're getting that real adrenaline rush straight off. It only lasts 10 or 15 minutes. Everybody says, I can't do that with my coffee. You can't, because it does give you a kick, but the kick doesn't last. So then you come down and you actually come lower than what you were before you started. Whereas if you just start on that even keel of a cup of tea, a glass of water and have your breakfast, there is no high, but there is no low. And that's the piece we have to get used to, because we're craving and searching all the time, aren't we, for this adrenaline kick, the stimulation, the kick.
Is there a personality type involved here, though? I mean, you know, like I've said it on air lots of times, my mother was an absolute worrier. I mean, when she'd answer the phone to us, it would be a case of what's wrong, for example. And I think that I'm very thankful to her she passed that on to me. Are there people who are natural warriors and people who are just prone to stress? Totally. And is it much harder for them?
It's much easier, I have to say, for the people that aren't the warriors.
Yes.
I have 2 children that are not warriors. I have one that definitely is a warrior. The other fella I don't know, to be honest. But I do know my youngest fella worries about nothing. Yeah. And even coming home yesterday, he's doing his junior cert and he was doing after school study, and he detests school to within an inch of his life. And I said to him, how was school? Grand. How was study? Grand. What did you study? Why does it matter? And as we were coming out along, and I said, you've only 4 weeks left, or 4, whatever it is. I said, you're not getting concerned at this stage. He said, well, worry isn't going to change anything, ma'am.
Oh, wow.
He said, like, why would I be worried? He doesn't concern himself. Oh, he has the best attitude. Even coming out along, he said to me one of the days, I gave him something and he said, thank you. And I said, God, that was lovely. Thanks, Jaden. Like, from a 15-year-old, you know. And he said, I've learned, he said, if you say thank you for things and you smile nicely, he said, people, you know, are on your side straight away.
Wow.
But he doesn't worry over anything. That's his personality type. Do you know what I mean?
That's great.
Whereas there is a personality type like you, like me. I am that personality type. I do overthink, but I am training myself.
You deal with it.
It's like eating, Fran. It is like every single day you have to instill the habit. You have to build new
let me put you on the spot then.
Yeah.
Step 1 for warriors, people like me. What should we do?
So you have to retrain. So if you're overthinking now this minute, you have to go backwards in your head and say to yourself, what is it I'm overthinking about? Because you mightn't even know. You might just have the gut feeling of the anxiety, but there might be nothing in your head. And you have to go backwards to say to yourself, what is it that's actually concerning me? And when you go back and you actually address it, you say to yourself, is it something I can control now? Or is it something that I can actually push out, say, 2 or 3 days? Or is it going to even concern me in 2 or 3 days? There's 2 types of stress. There's like the trauma stress. So say if somebody in your family has cancer, there's been a car crash, things like that. That's a trauma stress, and that's nothing we can do about. It's there and we have to learn to cope with it, right? The other stresses, I can't think of the word now, but they're the everyday little stressors that we build up into things. We can deal with them because we're overthinking them. And if we actually say to yourself, you know, is that something I need to worry about? Sometimes you can take it out of your head. Jerry Hussey had a piece up, great man to interview. He had a piece up on Instagram the other night, right? And he had said, and I love this, it's like every single day if you do the 5 pillars, 2 within 70%, if you do the food, the hydration, the exercise, the sleep, they control the stress anxiety, right? So if you do the 5, then the stress anxiety is alleviated a bit. You're building, what's the word? Capacity. You're building capacity, right? So every day you do that, when something happens in your world that is a major stress, you have the capacity to deal with it. But if you're not doing the 5 pillars every day to within 70%, when something happens, you don't have the capacity. You're already burnt out. So now a stress that isn't even a trauma stress, but is a stressor of some sort, becomes a trauma stress in your world because you don't have the capacity to deal with it. You're already burnt out.
It's very interesting. And listen, says, could you ask me, Ariel, if you suffer from very bad anxiety, so much so that it affects your digestive system all of the time, would hypnosis help, for example?
I'm not going to comment on that because I don't know enough about hypnosis and the gut or whatever. But I do know if you can control your nutrition, all of that side, it does help with the anxiety side. I think it's one drives the other, if that makes sense. So if you have someone to work with you on your digestive system, it might actually help alleviate or help dissipate the anxiety piece.
Yeah, interesting. And are you seeing more anxiety in the last couple of years?
Crazy. The amount of stress and chronic stress, it's one of the questions I'll ask as part of my consultation in the beginning. I'll ask every single person, are you stressed? Do you stress? Are you a stressy person? Are you anxious? And 9 out of 10 people will say to me, I am so stressed. And that's before we ever delve into. And the minute we start talking about that, then what medication are you on? Most of the people then from the age of 50, 52, 53, the meds have started. So there is a cholesterol tablet, blood pressure tablet, maybe they're pre-diabetic, maybe I'm seeing like HbA1c's coming in over whatever, 46, 47, but you can actually see on that side. And then the menopause, the same.
There's a couple of medications as well, and they don't always tell you about this. Some of the side effects can be anxiety.
Yes, totally, yeah. And other times when you actually present that you're actually feeling miserable, sometimes you're given an antidepressant or anti-anxiety meds or whatever, and if we actually could find the root cause, maybe you don't need them. Like Fran, everything has a root cause. The body is like amazing, but not complicated, if that makes sense. So like if we can go back to basics, stress wasn't a thing 30 or 40 years ago like it is today.
Yeah, this is a lucky person telling us this story. I believe if you go to bed at a regular time every night, you'll eventually have a great sleep. I work every day. I go to bed at 9 all my life. The situation now is at 10 to 9, I'm full of life. 10 past 9, I'm mad for sleep. The person to look at
no, that's a pattern.
Yeah,
he's built that pattern.
But it's a good pattern.
Oh,
though,
totally. But he's built that. It's not he's lucky. He's built that pattern. So you can't do that even like for 5 nights and then 2 nights.
That won't just happen.
No, it doesn't just happen. It's a pattern, right? So, and you're supposed to do it for 7 nights a week. So you're not supposed to be in bed like say 5 nights a week at 10 o'clock, and then 2 nights a week it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you're sleeping on. You're supposed to go to bed, go to sleep at whatever time, and then wake up the next morning and get up at the same time. And even if you have a phone beside your bed, so if you get up to do a wee at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and you look at your phone and it says 2 o'clock, your brain actually registers 2 o'clock, she needs to do a wee. So the next night you will wake at 2 o'clock.
So you're forming a pattern.
You're forming another pattern, yeah.
It's incredible, isn't it, what we do to ourselves. If people want to talk to you, Muriel, how can they do that?
Yes, they can call me on 062 88 002.
I'm not a bit stressed, no.
Well, the number stayed in anyway.
Thanks for that, Muriel. We'll take a break. Back with more in a moment.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puck-On. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puck-On to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
And you're very welcome back to Tipp Today, 1800 938 007. That text and WhatsApp is 083 311 3311. Owen, thank you so much for that piece that you sent me in. Most interesting, and I'm glad that your life is coming together. And if it's okay with you, either Stephen or Leanne will make contact with you. You might like to share your story with us on air. But right now, something completely different, because Tipperary musician Bill the Bard O'Brien is preparing to launch his new book, Lost Songs of Tipperary. Now, Bill has been working on the book for a number of years, and he'll be hosting a launch event at Brew in Cashel at 8 p.m. on May the 8th, and he's with me in the studio. Good morning to you, Bill.
Hi, friend. Thanks very much for having me.
You're very welcome, and I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. But take me back to the beginning of this. I mean, when did you get interested in songs?
Okay, so I've been a musician in various forms and worked in the entertainment industry on and off since I was a teenager. I first picked up a guitar when I was about 13 years old, and it's always been something I've been deeply passionate about. I worked my way through college and kind of did various part-time jobs, promoting gigs, playing gigs, working as a DJ, all these kinds of things. So music has always been a big part of everything I've been doing for all of my adult life, really. And after a brief stint of living away in Spain, just before the lockdown happened, all of that crack, I moved back to Tipperary after a good while away, and I kind of, I live out in the sticks, not too far from yourself, and there's not that much to do. So I found myself kind of frequenting singing sessions. Yeah. I'd go to quite a lot of singing sessions, most notably Jim and the Mills is just up the road from me. I'd be part of the furniture around there. And I really enjoyed it, kind of re-immersing myself in Irish culture, Irish music. I've always been very interested in local history as well. So ballads kind of fits both of those interests that I have. So I got very, very enthusiastic about the Irish songs. And after 6 months, a year or so, I kind of noticed I'm hearing the same songs. I'm hearing the same maybe 50 songs week in, week out, and I know them all off by heart now. So can I bring something new? Can I go home and can I find something new, maybe tell a bit of a story, and might be a bit interesting. So I did, just out of interest. I started looking. Have you ever looked through the schools collection?
No, I haven't. I've heard about it all right, but I haven't.
Okay, this is one of the most fantastic things an Irish government has ever done.
Yeah, it's a huge resource, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It's gigantic. So for people listening, what the schools collection was, it's on duckus.ie is the website. In the years 1936 to 1938, I think there was a bit in 1939 as well. Every national school student in the country was sent home to speak to an older relative, or mother or father, grandfather, grandmother, something like that, or an older person from the village or a neighbour, and to come back to school with a piece of folklore. And this is very, very diverse. You've got all sorts, like recipes, little pishogues, stories of something that happens, maybe, during our various rebellions as a country. Yeah. There's a lot of them kind of stories. But hidden in all of this is an awful lot of local poetry and local ballads and songs that were written. Some of these go way back to the 1798 and into the 1700s, 1800s. And these are songs that would have been local to a village or even a crossroads, because we were much more populated back in parts of Tipperary back then. And I looked up the primary school I went to. The national school I went to was Balloch National School. And there was a few songs in that. And after looking at them, I kind of figured out, I think I know what the tune to this is. I think I know what the tune
just by the metre of it, is it?
Yeah, I'm looking at the rhyming scheme, the metre. Sure. And as a ballad singer, I know 1,000 ballads already, and just kind of by a feeling, by a process of elimination, I can usually narrow it down to a few candidates, and as well, there's often clues in the history of the area. Like there might have been another song that was popular in that area at that time that was written. Yes, because the thing with Irish ballads is a lot of them are to the same airs.
Yeah, of course.
Like you could learn 50 airs and sing 2,000 songs.
Of course. Well, Bob Dylan would have acknowledged that over the years as well, because he would have written lyrics on top of existing old tunes.
And that was a very big thing in the 1800s. Yeah. And as well, like, we didn't have radio, television or internet or anything like that. People wouldn't know that many tunes. Yeah, they wouldn't have been exposed. Like you might live through your whole lifetime and maybe only be exposed to 20 or 50 different melodies. Yeah. Because we weren't bombarded with information as much as we are back then. So kind of looking at various aspects, I can narrow down the airs that they're to.
What the tunes would be. Were you surprised at the wealth of stuff that was out there? Because you're right. I mean, when I think about Tipperary, I think about Sheave the Man or the Hills Around Killinall or a couple of songs that are out there. But there's dozens of them.
There's thousands. Yeah. There's absolutely thousands. It's actually shocking. Like, I'm an amateur and I've been doing this only for a few years, and my personal collection that didn't make it into the book is approaching 1,000.
Is it indeed?
And
how did you narrow it down, by the way, to what you have?
Well, I wanted to represent different areas of Tipperary. We're a very big county. It's a 3-hour drive from here to Nina sometimes, depending on the traffic. Yes. And I wanted to spread it out. And also, I was kind of selective over different parts of our history. Yeah. I didn't want to have just a load of rebel songs or just a load of 1798 songs.
But it's also localised. I mean, the boys of Balloch, for example, if you're out for enjoyment, diversion or glow, give a call to old Balloch, as you did long ago. Yeah. For a good night's enjoyment, you'll surely put down in the dear old village a sweet Balloch. I mean, it's
it's amazing.
So localised, isn't it?
And there's names that pop up. And I think a name will pop up in some of these. I'm like, did I go to school with their great-great-grandson or something like that?
Oh, right. So you look for connection there, of course.
Absolutely. There was a great family that were involved in the war of the Dwyers of Balloch. Were very involved in the War of Independence and previous rebellions up until then. And I know who they are now, you know. And it really kind of brings it home. Like someone I used to sit across on the school bus too when I was a little nipper.
I love that.
And the songs
that
about
kind of thing.
about
Yeah.
their great
You have Clonelty in there as well. Clonelty,
Yes.
my home, a bright home of affection. There is no place so fair as that sweet little spot of contentment so rare, where the weary find rest and the stranger may roam. Of all places on earth is Clonelty my home.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's wonderful.
It's absolutely brilliant.
That one was written by, as well as The Boys of Balloch, actually, were written by the same man.
Right.
And this is a very interesting story. His name was Matthew McMahon, and he came from Galway. I think it was somewhere near Claren Bridge, a village just outside of Claren Bridge. This would have been late 1800s.
Yeah.
And he either had one leg or was lame in one leg. And once a year, he'd make a trip down to Waterford for one reason or another. And he was a great singer, musician. I think he played the pipes, actually. And what he'd do is he'd stop at every village along the way, go to the local pub, knock on the door and say, "Will you host me for the night? Keep the porter flowing, and I'll sing for your patrons until the porter stops flowing." And depending on the reaction of the publican, if they told him to jog on, he'd write a song about how awful this village is.
That's a real bardic
it's
tradition,
fantastic.
though, isn't it?
Yeah,
that is the real deal, isn't it? Yeah.
And if they fed him his porter, he'd write a song like this, telling them how wonderful Clonelty is.
Yeah, but of course, if he wrote something negative, that would be there for generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
the power of it,
absolutely.
was incredible. Yeah, and you describe yourself as the bard, or other people, I presume, describe you as the bard. So, do you carry on this bard?
I try
tradition?
to. I certainly try to. I think it's very important. Like, obviously, the role of a bard in old Irish society was what you do now. It was relaying the news.
Yeah.
It was digesting the news and presenting it to people in a way that they could understand. Because at the time, the vast majority of people weren't literate. People weren't reading newspapers, and there was no other medium. And the only way you'd learn the news of the next town over is if someone came and told you. And a great way to remember that is just to write a little song.
Right.
Like, if some battle or an ambush happens, someone would write a song about it, and that's how news would spread, not just locally, but throughout the country, and internationally as well.
Yeah. And I remember hearing about these penny sheets as well that were made available at fairs and the like, So it's just such a lovely tradition. There's so much in here. So tell me, I know that eventually you want to do a book on every county.
That's the idea. Yeah. That's the idea I'm floating around at the moment. It's going to be a lot of work, and it will take me a long, long time. But I think it's worth doing. I think it's something worth doing, because after, like, when I put this together, I didn't know how it would be received. I thought I might be lucky, a few people at singing sessions might be interested in it, and that was enough for me.
Yeah.
But I'm really overwhelmed by the reception I've got from this.
But there's so many singing houses out there and singing sessions, as you say. Sure, every one of them is going to want this.
Yeah, Coaltus have been very supportive to me as well. One of the first kind of bulk buys that I got from this is they bought a big stack of them, and they gave one out to every branch in the county, which I'm so proud of, because that means they will live on.
Isn't that great? Will you record all of these songs at some point, or some of these songs? Or
I'm thinking of doing an audio book, actually, which is basically just me. I'll be maybe I'm accompanied with music, maybe not.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of actually converting it to an audio book, because then I can, rather than describe how to sing them, actually do it. So that's it. It's on the to-do list, and I'm not fully committed to that now, but I think it would be a very good way, particularly for the international audience.
Absolutely,
because the interest is not just Ireland. Like the Americans are very interested.
Absolutely, certain of it. Where is this available?
Right. So I've got. Quite a lot. While I'm in Clonmel, I need to call into a few bookshops while I'm here, because it's a bit far from where I live. At the moment, it's in Bookworm in Thurles. I've got quite a good stack of them. The Sheila Nagig bookshop in Clough-Jordan have a good few of them. There's in Super Value in Cashel. It's also in the ABI, the charity shop in Cashel. They have a good stack of them as well. And if you can't make it out, I've set up an eBay page. If you go onto eBay and just look for the Lost Songs of Tipperary, I'll post one out to you. And if you want it signed, I'm happy to do that as well.
Right. And
you don't need an eBay account to do that. You can just do it.
Tell me about your launch night then, because it's happening on the 8th.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. The Brew Centre have been very supportive of me. Huge thanks to Ronan there. He's been very, very helpful. he's done a few book launches and that kind of thing there before, so his expertise have been absolutely fantastic.
What will happen on the night?
So I'll be giving a bit of a talk about the process of collecting songs, figuring out the airs, that kind of thing, and I'll be performing and singing a few of the songs from the book. Possibly some special guests as well. I'm working on that at the moment, and there'll be a few cups of tea, bit of cakes, that kind of thing, and then questions and answers afterwards, and just
good.
a bit of a chat.
Will you recite one before you go? Will you recite something of your own choice before you go?
Let me choose one now.
By the way, it's called The Lost Songs of Tipperary, and Bill, of course, is behind it. It's an anthology of forgotten ballads from the Premier County, and I think it's a huge treasure trove of stuff indeed. And you're going to recite one of them for me.
Okay, so this one I got from this comes from the County Museum in Clonmel. I booked a full day there, and I asked them they were absolutely fantastic in facilitating me for this. They went off and they collected from many different locations every little scrap of anything that even looked like a song or a poem for me, and it was a really big stack. And there's a few of them that I've included in there. This is my favourite. It's called My Own Irish Rose. The author is unknown. This just came from a scrap of paper that they were given as part of a collection decades ago, and it's to the tune of Carrickdun, also known as The Mountains of Mourne, by Percy French. From New York's great city, my thoughts fondly stray, o'er the blue trackless sea, to a spot far away. It's the shore's verdant valley, the peace I love best, and the home of the pretty fair maids of the West. 'Twas there midst them all, where the river sure flows, that I won the heart of my own Irish rose. Sure 'twas there in the moonlight I heaved a deep sigh, when I hugged her and kissed her and bade her goodbye. Since I crossed the sea to the land of the free, my charming young Colleen proved faithful to me. And like the bright beacon that guides ships at night, her true love unchanging was my guiding light. 'Twas there midst them all, where the river sure flows, that I won the heart of my own Irish rose. Sure 'twas there in the moonlight I heaved a deep sigh, when I hugged her and kissed her and bade her goodbye. And so till our meeting, where the river sure flows, my heart will be beating for my own Irish rose, and sing her praises 'neath Erin's blue sky. She will take my name where I bade her goodbye. 'Twas there midst them all, where the river sure flows, that I won the heart of my own Irish rose. Sure 'twas there in the moonlight I heaved a deep sigh, where I hugged her and kissed her and bade her goodbye.
Yeah, what a lovely lyric, isn't it?
It's
Just
really beautiful.
Gorgeous altogether, really, really special. The Lost Songs of Tipperary, edited by Bill O'Brien, Bill the Bard O'Brien. Lovely to have you in studio, Bill. We wish you the very best. And I presume everybody's welcome along to Brew Brew on
Absolutely,
the 8th.
yeah. It's free entry as well. There's no need to book. Just show up. It's 8 o'clock, Friday the 8th of May.
Real pleasure. Thank you. Great to see you, Bill. Thank you. We'll take a break. Back with more.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, puck on. It's time to change. Test drive the award-winning range of Peugeot hybrids and fully electric vehicles at Slattery's Garage today. See slatterysgarage.ie.
If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tipp Today on 1800 938 007.
I'm going to stay with music, but a very different kind of music. Emily Jane O'Dwyer has set up a music collective for Tipperary, where she will start running events for electronic music lovers. And Emily Jane O'Dwyer from the Revive Collection joins me now. Good morning to you, Emily Jane.
Hi, Fran. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, and thanks for coming on with us. You say the purpose of this, Emily Jane, is to try and save the nightlife around Clonmel and surrounding areas. How bad is it, do you think, out there?
Yeah, it's gone dire the last couple of years. Like, if you actually look at the stats in Ireland alone, there's only 84 active nightclubs left in the country.
Wow.
So there's really no opportunity, especially for up-and-coming DJs, to have a chance to get on stage and play in front of people, like, and for people to go out and have a dance. You've been
DJing for some time, I think, Emily, have you?
Yeah, like, I'm really only kind of new into the scene. I've been a raver. I'm into music like for years. When I started DJing the last year, I've been DJing. I've had a few gigs in other counties, and I've kind of played with other collectives. And there's just been no opportunity to play around Tipperary, and that's like, I would love to bring a bit of a scene around Clonmel and around Tip, just to kind of have something local. So that's kind of what we're doing here.
And I would imagine there's an appetite among young people out there, particularly for this kind of music.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I travel, personally, I travel a lot, like, up to Dublin. Like, I have to travel further afield to go to gigs and see DJs. And there's a lot of people, like, it's bustling up around Dublin, Cork, plenty of other counties. There's nightclubs that are filling up down there, and there's great lineups and great local talents. And it's great to see, especially since COVID has kind of really come back around, and a lot of people are starting to come out again. So I think it's a great opportunity to try to bring something around Tipp, because I think we really need it. Like.
And of course, you know, when you're rehearsing what it is you do, it's grand in a bedroom or at home in the house, but there's nothing like that experience of being in front of a crowd.
Yeah, that's the thing, and as a DJ, it's the experience. Like, we're mad. All we want to do is get out and play music and have a good time and connect with other people, especially that are into it as well. Like, it's such a lovely thing to be able to go out and kind of meet other people that are into the same thing.
Yeah.
And get to play and feel the energy off the crowd. And, you know, like, it's human contact. It's like, it's important that we have that, like, that we're not stuck at home. And you need to get out and kind of socialise. And I think we need to kind of bring that back around, definitely, especially in Tip. Like, it's dead around. There's no pubs left.
And why is that, do you think? Why is Tipperary so bad? Because you mentioned some other counties that are doing pretty well where electronic music is concerned. Why are we falling behind here in Tipperary?
Not sure. I think it's just it's a fact. There's a lack of venues. Like, there's no nightclubs left. There's very few pubs left around. Even myself, like, I've kind of gone in myself to a lot of places, pubs, and kind of pitched ideas. And
yeah,
a lot of places turn us away at the door, you know, without giving us a chance. And I'm not sure why that is exactly. I don't know, it's because we're just a smaller county in general. There's just not that much opportunity there for venues to have a space for DJs to come in and play.
And is there a kind of do people have difficulty with electronic music? Is there a prejudice against electronic music, do you think, in some venues?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. Like, there is kind of probably a stigma around it. A lot of people maybe don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, rave culture, but it's a beautiful thing, and people need to kind of just open their mind a little bit to it. Like, you know, people of all ages. Like, I go to a lot of events myself, and, like, it's people. It's not just young people. It's the older generation too. Like, there's people there that would have been so into the music.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, the early 2000s, you know, it would have been a great scene back then. They're still into that music, and they still want to go to these events. And it's a great place to go to meet other people, and I think we really, really need to have that around Tipp. 100%.
So you have an event coming up in Carrick-on-Shore, I think. When is that happening, Emily?
Yeah, so we got our first event, thank God. So we have a venue that let us in. Connor's Live in Carrick-on-Shore. It's going to be the 30th of May. So myself and the co-owner of Revive, Caitlin Butler is her name, we came up with the idea together. So she is going to play, I'm going to play, and we have 3 other DJs. SJP, he's from Clonmel. We have My Angel, he's from Tiptown, and we have another DJ called Spudgy, and he's from Feather. So we'll all be playing, and we'll have Prodigy Inc. So we have tattoo artists coming down as well, and they're going to set up a booth, and we're going to have flash tattoos on the day. So it's going to be a great day. Like I just hope people turn up and come have a dance and see how we get on. And you never know, you might find other people into the music.
I'm sure, and everybody's welcome right across the board. You're saying to me,
exactly. Yeah, obviously it'll be over 18s, but anyone, all ages. If you're someone that's into the music and you don't have people or your friends aren't into it, come on your own and meet other people. That's what I do, and I have made friends in places like this for life, or people that are like-minded. So it's a great place. There's no judgment. Come and just have a dance and have fun.
You'll have to forgive my ignorance of the electronic music scene, but who are the big stars of electronic music at the moment, Emily?
There's actually a lot of talent around Ireland. Like the female DJ, Tara Casey is her name. She's from Cork. She's making waves across the country at the minute. There's another DJ, Miro is his name. He does now. You probably don't understand the type of music, but it's lively, bouncy music. He's after playing in Tomorrowland. And he's from Mullingar. Like, there's DJs all over the country that are so talented.
That's great. And do you create your own music as well as mix and play music? Do you create your own?
I'm trying to get into it at the minute, but no, not yet. But hopefully in the future, I definitely will be producing my own. But at the minute, it's just the mixing side of things is where I am.
Right. Okay. So you're going to take over Tipperary. I can feel it already, Emily. And will you will you expand then with Revive Collective? Will you try and expand?
That's the plan. Like the plan is just the sole purpose of it is just it's a place to bring DJs in to give them a space. So I'm hoping that if there's any other aspiring DJs or young people in their bedrooms learning by themselves, get in contact with us. We'll help you learn. We'll give you a chance to play. We'll try to get more venues. We're hoping to get more venues on board, and we kind of do pop-up raves around the county in other separate pubs.
That's great. And do you still use decks, or do you use electronic forms, or how does that work?
Oh, it'll be on the decks. Yeah, we have decks, so we'll be bringing all the gear on the day when we go to the pub and Connors Live. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be all on decks. Yeah.
Well, it all sounds very exciting indeed. So Carrick-on-Shore, that's the first of many, I hope.
Please God, yeah. Hopefully this goes well. If we can get people on board and people to come support, then we can make it a thing and we can make it more regular. That's the plan.
And what about for the summer? Are there big electronic festivals happening? Anything we should know about there?
No, there's Forbidden Fruit is on. There's actually a great lineup for that.
Yeah.
You have All Together now in Waterford. That's a great festival, and there's a lot of DJs will be playing there too. There's loads. There's actually a lot if you look into it.
Okay.
There's a lot around.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck. It is Connors Live Pub on the 30th of May there with Emily and a whole bunch of other people taking part in that. And if electronic music is your thing, it's the place to be for sure. Emily, lovely to talk to you today. Something different on the programme this morning. Delighted. Thank you. We wish you the best.
Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye, Emily. That's Emily Jane O'Dwyer there, and we wish her well and her friends too. That's it for me. Stephen produced, and the other Stephen is on the way with the Time Tunnel. I'll talk to you tomorrow. At that stage, we will be live from Nina on Outside Broadcast. Look after yourselves in the meantime, won't you? Bye-bye.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.